All right, we're going to start our meeting. First of all, I want to welcome everyone here, especially those who have traveled from your communities, who have taken time off today to come up here and tell us what regulations that are burdening you, that are hindering your business. And again, it's a big sacrifice to take off from work to drive up here, and this committee really appreciates the sacrifice that you gave up today, your time, your resources to come up here and address the committee. So with that, welcome. We're going to start. We have a number of people who have come to testify today, and out of courtesy, we're going to sort of go in order. I know there's some that have traveled from far distances, so the chair is going to try to get those folks up first, so they've got a farther distance to drive back home, and we're going to try to hear from them first. And with that, we're going to start. What I'd ask you to do as you come up and testify is briefly, again, tell the committee who you are, your business, where you're from, and then probably about five, what's on your mind. Tell us what's going on, why you're here, what regulation that you're having a problem with. And keep that to about 5 minutes, and then we'd like to have a little opportunity after that for any questions between the committee members and you to talk about that issue. So with that, we'll start. I think our first person we're going to call on is Roy Taylor, and I think he is going to get the award for traveling the farthest today. Roy is from Valdosta. Roy, thank you again. Thank you for taking your time. I know it's a long drive up from Valdosta, and we appreciate you coming this far to talk to us. So with that, the mic is yours, and take it away.
My name is Roy Taylor, and I'm from Valdosta, Georgia. I'm what's called an investor, a builder, an owner of properties, job creator, hopefully. And the first statement I would love to make to our legislatures and to you who pass on these ordinances that's come down to us, and I have, when I finish, my city manager had got together some things to leave with you of some real burdens. And I want to tell you about 3 instances, and then I'll be out of your way. About a few years back, I bought 17 buildings downtown Valdosta with the idea of developing them, making them look decent, because Valdosta had went downhill tremendously like most inner cities. And I ran into regulations after regulations, and then I really ran into a regulation called the Historical Society Preservation Committee. And that's what I gave up. And I sold those buildings. Now, I have found in the last 2 years that, of course, we had a mayor on your board. And I'm sure you remember Mr. Freddie, who's not on your board anymore. You are Mr. Oh, you're not the man who runs the DCA board? Excuse me. He was on that board, and he's no longer there. We had to move him on. Anyway, a building today, just a little 3-person office. You have sent us regulations down that says we must put a water fountain in there that people might drink water out of a water fountain. Now, we know that a $250 water cooler is more sanitary, no waste in it. You go out to Walmart, or Sam's, and buy it, install it, they bring the water. Now, that water fountain costs an average of $2,000 to put in an old building as well as a new building, because you got to run your plumbing and all of that. A friend of mine just built a building that's it's a liquor store, whatever you want to call it in your nice way up here in Atlanta. It's a package store, whatever. Now, they made him put in one, first of all, it's cost $2,000. Now, that's a guy going in, buying a bottle, and leaving. He doesn't have time to drink water because he's in a hurry to get a drink. Now, then they come back and say, well, that's good. That $2,000's fine. Now you've got to put in a handicap one right side of it. That's another $1,500. And on a $200,000 building, that ran that cost up 3.5%. That one little item. I tried to help a lady start a nursing home, go into a bigger house. She had 12 clients in her nursing home. We start getting a building rezoned, all the little tit-tats done to build her a bigger nursing home, to remodel it, to go through the city regulations, fire, and then we hit that state. It took us 11 months. One fellow in the health department wanted to know how long our septic line was from the septic tank, which had worked perfectly for 15 years. And I had no way of knowing. I said, why don't you tell me how to measure it? Whatever it was built to regulations when it was put in. Well, you've just got to measure it. I said, well, what if we get a rotor-rooter man to come in with a little line and measure it, 50 foot, 100 foot, tell us how big, how long? No, sir, you got to measure. I said, well, why don't you come out there and jump down in the septic tank, swim around and measure it? Probably you could tell me. So anyway, then we get on with all the city stuff. We finally hit the health department, and he was with them. We come up to Atlanta. They would come down. Well, you do this, we do that. And in the meantime, it's taken 30 to 60 days. Finally, at the end of that, I got a hold of the Attorney General's office, which that time was a pretty good friend, and we got it done in 1 day. Now, if you want to be exasperated today, try to be a builder. My mayor told me he was going to put every used car dealer out of business on Ashley Street, which is our main business street through town, because he put a double agenda of regulations on us. He wanted us all to look like the college street named Patterson Street. But the hospital owns all of that street, and the college owns the rest of it. 20% of it pays taxes on Ashley Street. We all pay taxes. And it's always been the business street for 150 years. So that helped me find my mayor stealing 14 times in 14 months, and we got rid of him. He's no longer mayor. He can't even run for office again for 3 years. That gives you an idea. Now today, this city and the Home Builders Association just come up with one of your amendments you sent down to us. And do you all ever find the code comes from the feds that you don't like? Have you really? You found one you didn't like? If you have, you haven't failed to send it down to us, because we get them. And I'm not criticizing. I realize you have a job to do. But we need jobs in Georgia today, gentlemen. We've got 17% unemployment in Valdosta, Georgia. Now, those unemployment lines says we got 9%, but I'm talking about the young people that did not graduate from college that needs a manual job. They have no job. And we've got 17%, and that's the low point of it. We don't need any more regulations. We don't need any more ordinances. And I have electrical one here I'm going to read to you. It will take just a moment, and then I'll be through. This is an example of electrical code amendments beginning 2012. Every breaker will be required to be ARC fault, F-A-U-L-T. The normal cost is $3.95 for that. Under the new deal, it's going to be $34 to $37 per breaker. 15 of them has to go in a 1,500 square foot home. Now that raises the cost of that 1,500 square foot for the home $450. But that's the only sad part about it. When you put that many breakers in an existing home, it shoots all the Christmas lights and everything, and you got to put a bigger breaker box because those breakers are bigger than the other. Therefore, you've increased the cost of that home another $1,000. Now, I've probably been here 5 minutes, but I want that to sink into you. We had a communist one time that told one of our presidents beating his shoe on the desk, He would infiltrate our government. He would infiltrate our churches, and he would infiltrate our people. And we are reaching fast that socialism, which is almost at communism, because your group is telling us what to do. We have our home, our city hall in a building that was built 130 years ago without any regulations. It's perfectly good standing there today, and if you try to tear it down, we'll vote you out. So that's what I'm trying to tell you. This electrical thing, oh, there's so many things in there. But what you need to do, I'm a taxpayer. I'm proud I paid $307,000 in taxes last year. God gave me the ability to do that, and the American dream gave me that opportunity. But you are fastly diminishing that American dream. And the regulations, requirements, I hope you've heard of Agenda 21. If you haven't, go for it, study it. We need help.
Well, Mr. Taylor, that's why we're here, and that's why we want to hear exactly from you guys who are coming up and want to tell us every day. And quite frankly, if you've got a few minutes, we would maybe like to open up some questions, maybe for the committee to ask, and I would entertain it. The committee got any questions?
One
Mr.
other
Taylor?
thing, that
Yes,
little
sir.
lady in that nursing home give out of money. 11 months after she had been in business for 3 years, she finally gave out of business. She give out of money. She's out of business today.
Well, Mr. Taylor, would you be available for a few questions from the committee members?
Yes, sir. Anybody wants to ask me anything, I'm a knowledgeable
right.
fellow.
Representative Harden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Taylor, I was listening, and I understand your frustration. But do you happen to know which of these were city regulations, county regulations,
sure do.
state, or
Oh,
federal?
yes,
All right. Are all of them state, I guess, is what I'm
the
asking.
water fountain came down from the state.
From the state, okay.
Yes, sir. This electrical thing just came down this week or last week, maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, from the state.
From the state, okay.
I believe they come from your DCA board, the Department of Community Affairs.
All right.
I believe they overlook them.
All right. Now, the the length of the septic tank line, and the reason I'm asking is I want to see what we have immediate supervision over so we can determine what we can help right away.
The septic tank line came from the health department, and they had me so frustrated, I called my city. I paid $6,500 to bring in new water, new sewer, and everything because it was 2 blocks down the street. I don't know how to measure a septic tank line. I would have left to had my hands on that fellow. I would have put him down in that tank, let him measure it.
Yeah, I understand, and so that's probably a county regulation, but
Part of it's
we
county,
need,
but
yeah.
a good bit of it is state because that's who we had the final battle with.
Yeah.
I had to get a hold of the governor's office and every important politician up here.
Yeah, and that's why I want to see what effect we can have on the other regulations that were a problem to you and what you're trying to do. The probably was a city regulation on the street you're talking about and how it needed to look as good as another street. Is that city reg? You mentioned the mayor.
We got rid of the mayor. He come up here and got on this board, the DCA board.
Yeah.
And every time he would come home, he would have a new regulation. And
Yeah.
I thought he was stealing, and that's about the only way we got rid of him, but we did get rid of it.
All
And
right.
he no longer has that, but he put what he called, and he sort of forced our councilman, he buffed him, and putting all these, every meeting we would have. I didn't realize this the first 4 years he was there because I supported him. I supported him the second 4 years until I found out all this. But anyway, he would sort of force these little regulations on and make them think he was there, and he didn't have that power. They know that now. I've made sure they know that.
Yeah, and Mr. Taylor, I was in I had a small business for about 30 years, and I know what you're talking about, and I just want to kind of categorize these so we'll know how to approach them and what we need to do. And I appreciate your time today, sir.
18. Okay. Any other questions from committee members? Mr. Taylor, first of all, I want to thank you for coming up, and I think Representative Harden has asked a good question that's probably that's why this committee is here. And obviously that we have authority over what, the state regulations that we can do. Obviously, some things are federal, which we would need to gather our congressmen together to talk to them. But we want to know what we can do at the state, and I would be happy if you could continue to work with Representative Amy Carter and maybe make yourself available to this committee such that we could maybe dive down in more detail as to some of these state regulations that you've just explained to this committee that was such a hindrance, not only to you as a builder, but to the homeowner or to the property owner who's trying to who's ultimately going to take possession of the structure. So, would you do that for us? Could we rely on you to help this committee?
I think this lady and Amy has my number, and I'd be more than glad to do that. But now I am 79 years old, and I got a little old folks shaking. So hurry up! Don't take as long.
Well, in fact,
don't take as long as the feds do.
Mr. Taylor, in fact, there's Representative Carter now. I know she was. I was just told she was at had to present a bill at another committee meeting, but Representative Carter, I don't know if you have any questions for Mr. Taylor, but he has certainly done a good job of explaining some of his issues that he's run into in your area. So
I believe what he says to be true.
Well, thank you, Mr. Taylor, and I know we have your contact information, and certainly we'd like to. This is one of the areas we're going to dive down into. Thank you for taking your time, especially coming all the way up from Valdosta, Georgia.
I appreciate y'all, and none of this is personal. I hope you understand that. But my grandchildren are going to have America to live in when I'm gone.
Amen.
And they will have it.
That's why we're doing
that. That lady is going to be my next governor. She gets things done.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Next. I want to call next one of my constituents, Drew Miller from Griffin, Georgia.
It's a hard act to follow. I don't have that.
Well, if you will, start by telling us a little about you and what the committee, what you do, and your issues.
Sure. My name's Drew Miller, and I'm 32 years out of pharmacy school, so I've been doing this for a little while. I live in Griffin. I own a pharmacy down there. I employ 11 people, and we've been chugging along pretty good. But we run into some roadblocks the last 4, 5, 6 years, and in pharmacy, what a lot of people don't understand, we've always got an issue. We've always got something going on. But pharmacists are pretty resilient, pretty crafty. They can work their way out of tight spots and everything sometimes. So I'm real proud that we've been able to do this. All of a sudden now, the bucket's full, and we're running into more problems than we ever have. And I've, speaking to your committee online when I put in my information, I wanted to go over a couple of things that are really hindering us from growing. 2 years ago, I had enough money in the bank to go 36 days without taking any money, I was very proud of that. I have 9 days right now, and I'm no different because there's a lot of pharmacies out there that are 2 days out, 5 days out, 7 days out. So this is how things have changed in the world of pharmacy over the years. We are put upon mostly by the dictation of insurance companies on how we run our business every day. And there's 3 points I just wanted to bring to you today. I'll try to be real brief. One of our big problems is what's called a MAC price, and the businesses that do business with the state of Georgia, the insurance companies, the pharmacy benefit managers that do business with the state of Georgia for Medicaid and for state retirees and state employees, over the last few years have made it a point to failed on a regular basis to increase volatile generic prices, and the generic market is not like it used to be. If a price on a drug, a generic Lasix, were to be 7 cents, it stayed 7 cents, and it stayed 7 cents, and it stayed 7 cents. Well, that's not the case anymore. We see generic prices change on a daily basis, and I do have a couple of examples if your committee is interested on this that I can give you. But we're talking about huge increases in prices without any kind of notice. What happens is with the companies that are doing business in the state of Georgia, they drag their feet on raising those prices. So the consumer that comes in, the patient, has been to the doctor, got a prescription for a product, comes in, and we run it through on our computer, send it off to the insurance company, to the Peach State people or whatever. It kicks back to us with the price they're going to pay. Well, all of a sudden, we're losing $9. We're losing $11 on a prescription. And they've made it very convenient by sending us a sheet of paper that says, why don't you appeal this and try to point out to us, send us what you paid for the medication. We have a vehicle to recover this. Well, it's a cumbersome, very cumbersome vehicle. It doesn't work. It's not done on a timely basis. And our prices, we have to make a choice now in business. Either fill the prescription for a loss, and not just 2 cents, not just 5 cents. I'm talking about many dollars. This happens several times a day, or turn the patient away. I have called the doctor many times in my own pharmacy to say, we are having problems with this particular drug. Can you choose another one? And most of my doctors know me and they can do that. That's not always the case, though. And this happens daily, 5, 6, 7, 8 times a day. And so it's costing, I mean, the problem is that it's getting worse. And they know that because they've run out of vehicles to make money, I think, and so they're continuously doing this. And these are companies that do business with Georgia. So pretty much they've got that as their backing. You know, we're approved by the state. We can do what we want to. And we do sign contracts. And it is a take it or leave it contract. We don't have a lot of choice on this. And if we want to keep our doors open and keep our lights on and continue employing 11 people in my store, I have to go along with this. And I had a price on a prescription. I'll go ahead and give you a quick example. I had a price on a prescription drug that on May the 25th of 2011 cost me $4.97. The next day, it cost $18 when I ordered it. On 11/1 of this year, I sent through this prescription for the same product to one of the Medicaid providers here in Georgia. It still hadn't been corrected. It was still paying me back the $4 and something that I'd paid for it. So that had gone from May 25th to 11/1. Now, I know people say, well, that's just one example. How many do you want? You know, I can give you lists and lists of examples of where this is occurring. So this is a problem, and I know that there's a way to set up something, a rule, a law, or whatever from your committee that if you do business in the state of Georgia, you've got to update these prices on a routine basis. We had a meeting in the fall down in Macon, and we invited the 3 big companies that did business with Medicaid, the pharmacy benefit managers, and they sent a representative in. 2 of the companies met monthly to review pricing. 1 company met quarterly to review pricing. So that's a long time to go when we're having to buy that product that day and get it in and dispense it to the patient. So the patient's at harm, at risk for not getting the medication that his doctor ordered. And we have to make a choice. We can fill the prescriptions and lose the money and maybe cut off our lights and go from 36 days out to 9 days, like I've done over the last 2 years. Those are the choices we're having to make. And so what I'm asking your committee to do is have something set up in the rules and regulations that if you're doing business with the state of Georgia, there should be an oversight committee or some type of way for us to get the point across to them and do a request so much easier and make it retroactive. Because now if we point it out to them, I know I wasn't the first one to contact them on 11/1 when I tried to fill that prescription and say, hey, you know, you're not paying enough. You're way off on this. I know I'm not the first one. I hadn't, you know, I'm not that important. So I know that. But they may have done it for somebody in Hahira and fixed it. They may have done it for somebody in Blue Ridge, Georgia and fixed it. But they darn sure didn't do it for us. And they should have. And it should be a way to communicate among the 3 big players.
Should be a system-wide change.
It should be. It should be. So the system is flawed to their advantage. And we are not getting anything out of this. In fact, it's getting worse. And that's something that we face daily. And that's not just at Drew Miller's pharmacy.
Yeah.
That's at CVS Pharmacy. That's at Walgreens. That's at Hahira Drugs, wherever. So this is everywhere. The second thing I wanted to run across was an audit bill of rights, which we are audited on a random basis, supposedly, by the insurance companies that do business in Georgia. I want to make sure I get all this right before I say this, so if I have to correct myself, I will. But the businesses that are coming into Georgia, let's say I'm going to just use United Healthcare for an example. They do business with the state. They also do business with other people that have nothing to do with the state, but they have the right to audit us through a contract. We understand that because there are some pharmacies out there that have fraud, waste, and abuse. That's a big term right now that everybody likes to use with Medicare. And I understand that, and we're going to have some people take advantage of the rules. But the majority, I'm not talking about a small majority, the large majority of the pharmacists out there are doing what they're supposed to do when they're supposed to do it. And we're not out there to cheat anybody. We just want to be fair across the board. And so what we see is that we get an audit notice, and it's random the way they do it. Each company has their own set of rules. They don't tell you what they want up front, but you know that all they're looking for are expensive items. And they can find little clerical errors that may be an example that I had a child that was on medication for ADHD. They went to a doctor's group in Griffin, a pediatric group. Every month they got that prescription filled. The prescription never changed over 3 or 4 years. 3 times in a 2-year span, they saw a different doctor in that group. And the writing was like this, like a doctor writes. And we picked the wrong doctor those 3 times out of that 2 or 3 year period of time. Well, when we got audited on those prescriptions, it was $163 per prescription is what it cost us. They went back and recovered the money because we made an error on picking the doctor. Now, I went to the doctors and I said, can you write me a letter saying this patient's been on this medicine and here it is? The insurance company said, no, you can't go back and recover this because you made an error, so we can't take it. It was a clerical error in my point of view.
It was a clerical error, not a
no fraud intended.
Okay.
No fraud intended. So anyway, that's the rights they have because through contracts they can do that. What we're looking for is some protection on this, and I think there's been some bills that have been proposed over the years to come in, and we actually have an audit bill of rights right now. It doesn't have a lot of meat to it. I'm not sure how bills get from point A to point B, but I know there's a lot of discussion in there, and I know how this kind of works out. It's time to put some meat in there because we need some protection. We need to have somebody to stand up to us, and I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but I know I'm on record now. I've invited you to my store before when I have had an audit, and you sat there and watched the company that was sent in by another company, and the way that they make their money is they find problems. They don't work for the big company. They're farmed out, and they get a bonus on the errors they find.
Audit by commission.
That's right. So that's what they do. So what I'm asking for on the audit bill of rights is when this comes down, we don't want to have a company auditing us that gets a bonus for finding a problem. We also want to be able to be protected that if we have made an error, the medicine's right, the patient's right, all this is right, we really haven't made an error. We shouldn't give back the money. And we're talking about high dollar items. They don't ever worry about the 7 cents Lasix. They're worried about the $163 Concerta. So that's number 2. All right, the last thing I want to talk to you about is in the state. I know y'all got plenty of money up here. I know y'all got a ton of money you're sitting on, so this ain't going to be a concern of yours. But we are farming out tons and tons of money to other states by doing mail order and farming out our specialty drugs. And what this is that well, I'm going to pick on United Healthcare again, but no offense to them. They come in and they tell the powers that be, we got a deal for you. We're going to save you some money, and we're going to set it up. We have mandatory mail order. We're going to let you send off these prescriptions, and we're just going to save you money. Well, I need to keep my lights on, so sure, I'm not happy with that. I don't like the rules that we don't play fair. We don't get in the sandbox and play very fair with each other when we do this stuff. So we need some protection that we need consumer choice on this. We need to have the consumer be able to say, well, this is what I want to do, and not have huge incentives to do mail order because we're not making the money here. It's leaving. It's leaving and going to Minnesota. It's going to Detroit. It's going to all these other places, and that's where they're making the money. So if y'all got plenty of money here in your bucket, that's fine, but I don't in mine, and it's a concern. And also I usually have to fix the problems in my store when something goes wrong. And mail orders notoriously for going wrong. They send out too much. I can give you statistics and pictures of people with drugs lined up across their counter that they're never going to use that was sent in. I mean, I can provide all that if that's what you need to see. But the bottom line is that we've got people making decisions in the state of Georgia that's costing small business money by doing this when all we're asking for is fairness. And I know yesterday in the Atlanta Journal, there was an article about a furniture company. The owners were named the Hellmans, and all they wanted from the article says is just fairness. That's all they wanted was fairness. And that's all we're up here asking for is fairness, that if y'all ever have a question about this, come to a pharmacist and ask him. Don't go to an accountant, excuse me, and ask a question about how this affects your pharmacy and how it's going to save money, because sometimes they've just fed you a line. They're making a lot more money than insurance companies are than you ever would imagine on rebates and controlling the brand that they buy. No doubt about it. And if you don't believe it, United Healthcare in 2008 had if I remember these numbers right, had 2009 published something in Time magazine. I saw this. Their profits that year were $476 million, which was up $200 million from the year before. And so we've got these guys telling us how much money they're going to save us. Now, okay, what can I say? So those are the three things I want to cover. We're really trying out there to keep our lights on and to keep going, and we're trying to service the public. I mean, everybody relies on their hometown pharmacists, and we are doing our best to keep the lights on.
I know I can attest to that. Not only do I know Drew as a friend, but my sister-in-law is the pharmacist with Drew. So you're right. A lot of times it may be late at night or weekends. The independent pharmacists are the ones you call when you get in trouble, and I know that's very important. So.
We don't need the excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt, but we're not looking for anything but help. And when we present a bill or we come to you, instead of just complaining, we're just whining away down here. We're not just whining away. We've got a legitimate reason for it, and it's getting scary. I mean, I've got maybe 10 to 12 to 15 more years to go before I can say I can retire. I'm 55 now, so I've got a ways to go. And I would love to have retired when I hit 64, 65 years old, but that's not in the cards now. And so I see that it's not. But I'm telling you that it's going to get worse unless we have some help.
Well,
and if y'all ever have any questions, we can sure answer them for you.
That's why you're here, and I think this is the perfect venue of what we're doing to try to address some of these issues. So with that, would you be willing to take some questions from the committee? Committee, any questions or comments for Drew? All right, Representative Harden.
Yeah, thank you for coming up today, Mr. Miller, and I appreciate your input. I'd like to do basically the same thing that I did with Mr. Taylor, and that is to kind of categorize these things as to what they are. And from listening to your presentation, it appears to me that it is not state regulations that's causing the problem, but it's the people who the state is contracting with to deliver these services that are putting regulations on top of state regulations.
Right.
Is that a correct statement?
Yeah, because what they ask of us when we say fill a prescription, and I brought some handouts if anybody would like one to show what constitutes a prescription in the state of Georgia. Well, they've added on to that. They've made it more difficult. They found ways to go back and recover money. I've got a friend that's over in he's in central Georgia. He got audited not too long ago, and one of the companies now, when we receive a prescription, we have a way of getting it on the telephone, in writing, through the email, or by fax. Those are the 4 ways to get a prescription. Now we're required by the insurance companies to mark on there how we got that prescription. And the reason is because when it gets audit time, if somebody came back and I looked and I didn't have a very clean prescription years ago, I probably would have rewritten that one so it was real concise and real pretty for them so they could have read it. Well, now they want to know where it came from, so when they come back in, they can see that this is it. You said you got a written one, and now you've got it from a telephone call. That's wrong. We're going to take the money back. But what happened with this gentleman, he had gotten that, and he had marked some things wrong. They didn't fine him, but they charged him $8,000 back, or payback to them, because he had coded them wrong. So he coded the prescriptions incorrectly, not on purpose. He wasn't trying to hide anything. There was no fraud intended. He just screwed up, and that was it. And so they cost him $8,000. And this is a very good example of how this type thing happens, because they've got all the rights. We don't have any of them.
All right, now, if I'm hearing correctly, then what we're talking about is basically typographical scrivener's errors. No error in the prescription
No error in the
medication,
prescription.
no error in the patient, what the patient got,
Right.
or how it was prescribed.
That's
or
right.
The doctor's okay, and these are basically what you call clerical errors.
That's right.
And but when they find a clerical error, they're taking back. Well, I heard you say on one of these errors. Took back $489
Right.
Of prescription, and that actually, of that $489, probably $480 was your cost of the drug.
That's right. That's right. When
So
the ones-
therefore, your loss there was much more than it would be if your profit margins were a little better.
That's right. And one of the things on my handout, I've got a sheet that was provided by auditors that say what can be, how they look at things, and the list is about 20 items long. And what it says on most of these, on the majority of them, is documentation not accepted, which means you can't go back to them and get rebuttal on it and get your money back. You have nothing you can do, and it's things that just really the fairness isn't there.
All right, so basically, then we're looking at the people whom the state contracts with, and the things that they use to increase their profits,
That's right.
while basically decreasing the profits of the small businesses
That's
in
right.
the state that
That's
are
right.
pharmacies.
And with some protection, or a venue to have protection, whether it was a oversight committee. I'm not sure how we'd go about doing this, but we can put our heads together and come up with something. But for me to fax off a sheet and say that your prices are wrong on this and get a response back in 3 weeks, and then not be able to go back, or 3 months, or whatever the time period is, and then not be able to go back retroactive and recover that one, even though they admitted, well, we had it wrong. There's no recovery on that.
And one more question, and I think most of these folks up here know I'm a pharmacist, so but the other thing that I noticed in your presentation was that now actually the pharmacy benefit managers that the state contracts with, all right, they own mail order pharmacies.
Yes.
And therefore, when the state mandates a mail order pharmacy, or when they mandate it for others, then they are dealing with their own pharmacies. Do you have any idea whether or not these pharmacies, mail order pharmacies, that are supposedly furnishing a better price are ever audited as you are?
No, I'm sure they're not. I mean, I have never heard of an audit by anybody, and they're not forced into that, so why would they? There's never there's no incentive for them to look at their own sales.
Thank you.
All right. Who's 27? You're not 26. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So thank you for coming down today. That's some good feedback. The last issue that you brought up is what he was talking about. So the insurance companies own the pharmacies, and I'm trying to figure out how they're able to offer the prescriptions, so competitively, and what you are looking for in terms of more choice.
I'd like to see a consumer choice that when the insurance company, the pharmacy benefit manager, comes in, instead of incentivizing a patient or a company to force mandatory mail order, that it should be a consumer choice where it's across the board the same. There shouldn't be a penalty for coming to my pharmacy to do business versus mailing something off. The ones that are making the profit are the pharmacy benefit managers that own the mail order company. And so they're all one and the same. They just maybe have a different name or whatever. So what happens is they come to your business and say, if you own a car dealership and you say, I want to do business with you, you say, fine, and here's what I'm going to do for you, and here are the incentives. And one of the things in our pharmacy benefit package is we can offer mandatory mail order, and this is going to save you a bunch of money. Well, it's going to cost you X amount of dollars per person for everybody out there. They're not going to save you any money. They're actually making money because they control the brands they buy. They get rebate money back that you don't see, and the state doesn't see that. So what we're saying is that because it's all one and the same, you wouldn't know that, but we know that.
But the consumer is paying a higher price to them for the mail order?
No, the consumer would probably be incentivized to go with them at a lower price, but it
Okay.
keeps money from coming back into Georgia because it's going to Minnesota. So if we set an even playing field out there, it could be a consumer choice whether to have mail order or not as an option and not incentivize this, then that would keep the money in Georgia.
But consumers tend to go with the lower price. So
Sure.
are y'all able to get the same rebates that they're
No,
able
they
to?
don't give us the same contract, no.
Okay, so what you're proposing then is that you get the same type of rebates that
Sure.
they're getting?
Oh,
Okay.
just as long as we could just say it's up to consumer. If you
Yeah.
if you worked at the car dealership, you had a choice. You could do mail order or not do mail order, and there was nothing taken away from the Georgia pharmacists that are
Okay.
out there doing business.
And then you're able to compete.
That's right. It
With
would
the
make
same-
me competitive.
Okay.
That's right. All I want to do is be competitive.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Miller, I appreciate you coming today and sharing with us your concerns and how we can get out of your way and allow you to be a profitable small business in your community. The concerns that you've shared with us today aren't, some of them aren't new. I've been hearing that from pharmacies in my district, and that's concerned me. And actually just this past week, I've been beginning to look into it a little bit. So great timing you being here. I think a couple of questions I have that have been partially answered, but one of them was the auditing. I think you just answered that you're saying, to your knowledge, that these PBMs aren't being audited.
Well, they wouldn't audit themselves.
Yeah, and no third party
No.
is.
But I'd like to see them audit each other, and then whatever the numbers come back, the state would pick the best of the bunch to do business with. I mean, I wish y'all would just put them in a hat and pull their names out and let each other, fight it out among themselves, and then whichever ones were the best one, let them float to the top, and then y'all pick them to do business with. And that's not going to happen, but no, they're not. There's no scrutiny on them. No.
Do you have a problem? I mean, as far as what you think would create a equitable playing field, do you think that if we just limited if they were, I don't think I have a problem with them United setting the price of what they're willing to cover. But as long as, am I hearing you saying you would be okay with that as long as they had the choice? The price could be set, which would probably be cheaper, my understanding, than what you could provide. These PBMs, by the quantity they're doing, they're able to offer. Is that correct? They're able to offer better.
That on paper, that's correct. But see, what plays into it too are the rebates they're getting for the manufacturers they choose, because they can go in and say, hey, I'm going to buy 10 million of these pills, and I can only buy 1,000 of these pills. So there's going to be a price difference in there. But I don't think it should fall back on the consumer either way. I think the consumer ought to have a choice, and the pharmacy benefit managers and the insurance companies just have a price across the board. This is what it's going to be. Why should you have to go out of state and get something in mail order? You're crazy not to spend less money. Why not just make it an even playing field?
Well, the volume that if I'm understanding correctly, the volume that United, let's use United for example,
Sure.
the volume that United has is what's enabling them to negotiate these rebates.
Rebates.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so
I assume. I have no way of knowing because they're not going to open up the books because there's no transparency in what they do. You just have to assume that their volume is going to drive a better price. How they're going to pass it on the consumer is maybe knock off $2 on a 3-month supply on something. I'm not real sure how their money figures into it, but I know it has to be out there somewhere.
yeah.
And I don't have a way to know. But I would feel like that if they were to turn around and say, all right, here's mail order, and here's letting you walk into the here's mail order, and here's what you'd pay to go into to the pharmacy down the street. I want it to be the same thing. That's what I'm asking, is some protection on that.
May I, Chairman, ask one last question? Sure.
Yeah.
Would you be content with them just, to me, to limit the price? I have a hard time thinking there's something wrong with an economy of scale as long as there's choice in a free market. It seems like there's several plans that are being offered, so I'm not sure if I see a problem there. But if we were to just, the price is published, what they'll cover, would you be content if they had the choice then, if they wanted to pay more to come get better service through a local pharmacy?
Sometimes that happens now. Sometimes they're saying you can come in and get your medicine from Drew Miller's pharmacy down there, but you got to pay a whole lot more for it. And right now, that it's not mandatory mail order, but the consumer should have. I think the insurance company should have said it's going to be the same either place. And if they did that, it puts me back on an even playing field. I can't I can't help what they do and what I do. I just want to be closer to an even playing field if possible.
Do you think Georgians would have affordable pricing in it with purchasing insurance, being that the cost of meds over the last several years is what's contributing to the...
Yes, I think they would. I think they would. It depends a lot about formularies. There's a whole lot of factors that go into that, but I feel like they could.
Okay,
Sure. Oh, sure. Yeah, sure. I think they could. Yeah.
We've got two more comments. We're going to cut it off. I know Representative Harden had a follow-up to, I guess, Representative Clark's questioning, and then we'll have one more after that.
And Representative Clark, I was just, volume is not the reason for the lower price. This is such a complicated web that has been woven in pricing. Basically, and you're familiar with, you go into the pharmacy, the prescription fill that your doctor wrote, and the pharmacist said, well, we can't use that drug on your insurance plan. It's not the volume of the drug they're buying. It's the fact that they said, look, we'll cut every other drug in that category off of this plan. And therefore, to the company, they say, you give us big rebates. Now, because the people that are doing that negotiating own the mail order pharmacies, then they're able to pass that on to their pharmacies, but would not pass that on to the independent pharmacies. So but the independent pharmacies I've talked to have said, if we'll use the same contract, the same prices to the patient, and that way, that there should be no price differential to the patient. As long as any pharmacy, in-state or out-of-state or mail order or whatever, follows the same rules and regulations and charges the patient the same price, then they should be given that opportunity. And at this point, they're not.
All right. Well, with that, I know we've spent Drew, we have. First of all, thank you for coming up. And I know you had some information. If you would, Kayla, if you will give the information to Kayla, and again, I know you may get a call from me or Buddy, because we would indeed like to continue this dialogue and dive down into the details of what you've presented today.
And I appreciate y'all's time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right.
I appreciate very much your listening. I've got a young wife at home, and I have to be out.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. All right. The next we're going to hear from Michael. Is it Michael Jeffrey?
Yes, sir.
Yes, please. Michael, tell us a little bit about yourself, your business.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. I'm here representing my family's business, and we are in telecommunications out in Covington, Georgia, not far from here. We have 3 companies that work together, Telrite Corporation, Life Wireless, and Pure Talk. And we provide services to consumers, including long-distance service, local service, and wireless cell phones, as we all use. We are a highly regulated industry. Most of our regulation comes from the Public Service Commission. Now, our company works in 48 states and Puerto Rico and is certified to work in all 48 of those states. So, in a manner of speaking, you can call us a great consumer of regulation or a highly regulated company. We see it from all directions in all different states. And I may sort of be the black sheep of today. As a matter of fact, I know I'll be the black sheep of today, but I wanted to talk about a few things that I felt like Georgia actually got right. And that I hope you all keep in mind as you consider regulation for other folks. We have been fortunate enough to have a tremendous amount of growth and success here in the state recently. Over the last year, we've increased in size from 48 employees to 109 employees in the last year, and have done really well by paying attention to the market and paying attention to what our consumers need and our customers. So we're very proud of that, and we're proud to be right here in Georgia and have all those jobs right here in Georgia. And before we can provide service in any of the fields that we do, we have to apply with the Public Service Commission here in Georgia, and it's equivalent in every single state. Sometimes it's a public utility commission. And we have done so for all those services, separately for long distance, separately to provide local service, and separately to provide wireless service as well. And we have found, by comparison, of Georgia to the 47 other states we work in, not including Alaska and Hawaii, that the PSC here does a tremendous job of not getting in our way. And that we are very thankful. Leon Bowles is the telecom director on staff, and Patrick Reinhardt is the engineer that we have worked with in most of our applications, and they have done a wonderful job of hearing us, hearing what we have to say, and helping a small company from a small town in Georgia compete against the likes of AT&T and Verizon. And we're really happy to do that. I wanted to speak briefly. One of the forms that we do every year is the Georgia Public Service Commission Telecommunications Universal Access Fund. And this is a fee that we pay that goes out on a quarterly basis. And you can see right here, I have it with me, it's 2 pages long. There are other states that I file this report, and it's 25 pages. And not to pick on anybody, but Illinois gets a little long when they start talking. But other states actually hire subcontractors, and I'm sure have to pay from them from the taxpayers' dollars to collect and assess these fees. And Georgia does a good job of making it simple and doing it themselves. And I think that's a tremendous plus for us that we don't have to pay someone else to tax all of the companies. In addition, one thing that I really wanted to tell you was very important to our company, starting out from scratch and being a small business. Like I said, we are a family-owned small business. My father-in-law is the president, and he started it, the company himself. There's a sort of a de minimis exception. On this, it's a simple quarterly revenue and a contribution factor of 1.4%. I wouldn't mind it being lower, but I know that's not up to y'all. That's up to the PSC. But for anyone where the amount is less than $12,500 in quarterly revenue, they don't have to contribute. And that's a big deal to us. And it was a big deal to us when we got started. These sorts of fees are typically passed through to consumers, but you still have to pay someone to do the work and fill it out. So having to not pay that little extra bit when you're getting started made a big difference. So I would encourage you, whenever you can, to have that de minimis exception. And it makes sense for you all not to have to employ someone to make sure that we pay 12 cents or $23 as when most of the revenue is coming from the higher revenue producers. So that was something that I think really enabled us to be successful and to start out here in Georgia. But again, I won't take much of your time, but I just want to point out that there are some success stories, and there are some folks that are getting it right. And I think the telecommunications department over at the PSC here in Georgia is definitely one of them.
Well, thank you. Hearing from you, that's the reason we're here, and it's good to hear that we are doing some things in the right way, and how more of these things. What can we do to follow along that and other regulations? So, thank you for coming. Is there any comments or questions from the committee? All right. Mr. Jeffy, if you've got something that I'm sorry, we do have one. Representative Clark.
Yeah, just one quick question. It's great to hear that we're doing everything right. That's encouraging. I hope we'll have more of you here. Is there anything that you're concerned about, though, going forward that you see in the horizon that may limit or get in your way?
One thing that is concerning and is a very large issue, and is not just a regulation issue, but E911 in the wireless realm is a very expensive fee, I feel like. Here in Georgia, we charge it's $1 per user, if I'm correct, and in other states it's as much as $2.25. And I think that this service, which allows ourselves and other cell phone providers to locate someone who has called 911 and may be unable to speak or communicate into the phone, to use the GPS tracking and other technological advances in the phone to try to locate that person. If you think about $1 a month over your lifetime of using a cell phone, that's a lot of money. If you use a cell phone for 50 years, $12 a year, you're talking about $600 that you've paid for a service that I think very few people need. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't need to try to do it, but I think that when you talk about that much money that a person pays for what we've all pretty much come to rely on as a service that everyone needs, not many people are going to forego their cell phone. Maybe that money could be better spent elsewhere. Maybe instead of making sure every rare occasion where a person is unable to speak into to locate themselves, some money could be used to improve the emergency room when they actually get there, and other things like that. It's a very large fee. It's something that has come on very recently, and I think that some people who provide that technology have pushed it forward. And I know from where you sit, you all get to hear about a life-saving measure that if we put in place might save some folks' lives, and that's hard to argue with. But I think overall, similar to what we've done, what you all are looking to do with the criminal justice reform, you have to look at the big picture and what the costs are and what the savings are, and how many people we really help with this, because the resources are finite, and that is a large fee to pass on to consumers. But again, I think that there are a lot of ways to handle regulation correctly. I know my friend, he just stepped out, but Representative Bruce Williamson works hard to keep costs low and to keep excess taxes, our tax rate down. And I know another good friend of mine, Representative Darshawn Kendrick, who actually let me know about this meeting. She works hard with business owners all over the state and to make sure that everybody has the same opportunities. And I want you to know that as a businessman, I appreciate both points of view, and that there's not a right or a wrong to it. Sometimes in an election year, compromise gets to be a bad word, but I think most business people just want to see the trains run on time. And we appreciate all the points of view that help make that happen. And we hope y'all continue to do more of that.
Well, thank you, and thank you for taking your time to come down here. And again, thank you. And if you've got anything that you'd like to give Kayla for the committee to keep on record, we'd appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. We're moving along. Even though we're running a little behind time, we're going to try to move it up. But great conversation. And the next person on the list is one of our former members, Kevin Levitas. Certainly miss Kevin. How are things going?
Great, other than the things I'm here to talk to you about.
Okay, all right. I know, Kevin, you had this is an item that you talked about previously, and certainly we appreciate you coming back and addressing the committee and telling us what you found.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you and the members of the committee, and especially Speaker Ralston and Governor Deal, for talking recently about appropriately placing the focus on small businesses, the vehicle that's going to get Georgia back up top, and we in the business community really appreciate that. Since we're running behind, I'll get to the point. The problem that my companies and several companies across Georgia face deals with the fact that the government, through the Georgia correctional industries and through state law, is excluding small business from an important sector of the marketplace, and that's specifically selling to the state government itself. To give you a little bit of background, the Georgia Correctional Industries was enacted in the 1960s, and it's now codified in Georgia Code at 4210.1 to 4210.5. And there were 4 objectives of the GCI program that I'm going to summarize, comment on briefly, and give you a little more explanation about in a minute. The first was that it was going to be a nonprofit, self-sustaining entity, and I will show you why in a few minutes it is not, in fact, a self-supporting entity. Second, most of the income was supposed to come from sales, and I put sales in quotes because they actually have no genuine sales. The third was to provide vocational training to inmates. They're unfortunately not receiving truly marketable skills. They're getting specialized skills, and there may not be very many jobs even for those that get out. The fourth objective was to provide low-cost, quality products to the marketplace. Well, first of all, there is no market price because the government has a monopoly, so therefore there is no market price. And with regard to quality, unfortunately, there's a decided lack of quality on many of the products that they're producing. To give you an idea of the level of participation we're talking about, on any given day there are about 1,400 inmates participating in this program who are taking jobs that could belong to Georgia taxpayers. More interesting even than that to me was a piece that a local news station did on the program a few months ago. And they found that there were, over a 5-year period, there were 700 people serving life sentences in this program, 48 of whom were under sentences for life without parole. And that begs the obvious question of why are we training folks for jobs that they're never going to get out and have an opportunity to even apply for, much less get. When we talk about GCI, I understand we're talking about businesses like mine, and my business is a chemical manufacturing business. We produce things like soaps and floor finishes for industry use, things like the needle oiler that I left on your desk, and by the way, if you need a lubricant, Hilco Lube is the best you can get. But we're talking about agriculture, eyeglass manufacturing, upholstered institutional commercial furniture, printing, decals, embroidery. There's over a dozen market segments that they're actually involved in. So we're not just talking about these about my particular business. What are the impacts of the Georgia Correctional Institute? Well, I will tell you that industries. I'll tell you there's one known and one unknown. The known is that small businesses are being displaced, and in fact, Georgia law at 5573 mandates that any state agency needing a product that Georgia Correctional Industries manufactures must buy that product from Georgia Correctional Industries. In fact, when I was going through the GCI website, they even boast at one point, no bids required. Well, of course no bids required because there's a monopoly there. And what's interesting to me is when I think about this kind of industry, it makes me think of our arch-rival trading partner, China, where they have a system of mandatory purchases, where they use prison labor to produce their goods. And the irony is, if I was to sell products manufactured in that way, I'd probably be violating federal law. As if all this wasn't bad enough, I was at a small business expo a few months ago, and a representative from DOS said, "Oh yeah, and by the way, whenever DOS bids on a state whenever GCI bids on a state contract, and DOS, for anybody that doesn't know, is the state purchasing arm, they get an 8% discount off the top. So if my bid for that same service or that same product was actually 7% lower than GCI, they're still going to win because they have this built-in price advantage. Keep in mind, they also have the advantage of not paying their taxes through employment. They're also not paying their inmates. And again, when I say it's not just my business, there's this news story that I mentioned. There was a company called Georgia Chair Company. That may have actually been the company that the previous speaker was talking about. It's a family-owned business like mine, and since the recession, they've lost about half their workforce, and they are struggling to survive. They say they can't compete against the state. First of all, you've got the exclusive market on direct sales, and then you've got this 8% price advantage that GCI enjoys, excluding small businesses from the marketplace at the very time we ought to be including them. The unknown part of this program is recidivism. Even though this program has been in place for 50 years, there have apparently been no studies to determine whether it's even doing what it's supposed to be doing. Is there any reduction in recidivism, either from inmates in the institution participating in the program while they're there or once they get out? The answer is we don't even know. So what I'm asking this committee to consider are essentially 2 reform measures. The first one's really easy. It's to remove this mandate from state law. Allow GCI to sell and allow state agencies to buy from GCI, but don't require it. Create a truly free market environment. The second proposal is more of a systemic reform that I think needs to be done. It was interesting going through those code sections I mentioned, and there is a code section there that lists, I think it's 15 enumerated powers that the Georgia Correctional Industries have. There is not a code section listing any kind of counterbalancing duties that they have. And what I would ask this committee to consider, and those of you that know me will not be surprised now that I've drafted up a bill for you, would be to do the following: to require the Georgia Correctional Industries to administer that program in a way that avoids the loss of private sector jobs. To also require them to provide notice to private sector businesses in Georgia any time a voluntary inmate labor program is going to impact those Georgia businesses, and an opportunity, by the way, like this one, for businesses to be heard. require GCI to collect data on whether recidivism is actually going down or up. Require them to track these inmates. Are they getting jobs when they get out of prison? And if so, is it in the same job that they've been trained for or something that's substantially similar? And what are the sentences that people are being served? The only way the news station found that information out was by filing an open records request. And by the way, this is consistent with the governor and the speaker's special counsel on criminal reform for Georgians, recommendations 13 and 14, in case you happen to have a chance to look at that report. The bill would also require GCI to give a report to the General Assembly based on the data that's collected and make available on the internet for you and for the public all the rules and regulations on that involve the GCI program, to have minutes of all their meetings, and probably as important as anything, to have an annual financial statement that are prepared according to GAAP standards. And finally, to provide regulatory oversight. That means applying the Georgia Administrative Procedures Act, including the power of the legislature to override regulations. What are the policy considerations in play here? It's basically to remove government from private business. In my view, anyway, government needs to be out of the way of businesses. If it's going to be involved, it ought to be in a support role. The last thing it ought to be doing is competing, particularly in a monopoly environment, which really is no competition. GCI still gets to keep, under these reform measures, its program if you see fit to continue it, and they continue to keep their advantages of wage and taxes. But now, finally, businesses have an opportunity to compete. That benefits the private sector, and it benefits the state. It benefits the state by creating and retaining jobs, by the payment of employment taxes, and by reducing unemployment rolls. As I mentioned, GCI really does not teach truly marketable skills. And the push, and I've left the chairman a copy of 2 different investigative pieces, and one was in Texas, one of the most conservative states in the union, where they found that focusing money on things like getting a GED, drug treatment and reform, truly vocational skills, that's the way to go. That's the way to reduce your prison population. That's where the money ought to be focused. And then we create a free market environment. So if we are teaching inmates, we're teaching them in a truly free market environment where their performance and their company's performance is required in order to sustain operations. I mentioned that those products are not of competitive quality, and what this results in is an inefficient use of taxpayer dollars. If state agencies are required to buy products that are not the best value in terms of price and performance, then it's an inefficient use of taxpayer dollars, and it's a waste. Finally, I mentioned to you that GCI doesn't sell its products. What GCI really does is it has an indirect appropriation without the benefit of legislative oversight. The legislature, in its wisdom, appropriates X amount of dollars to an agency. That agency then has to give that money over to GCI because state law says that it has to. And that might be okay if you could say, well, it really wouldn't be okay, but you can't even make the argument this is going for a quote-unquote good business operation. In 2009, at the request of Senator Jack Hill, an audit was performed of GCI. And that report found that in 2009, there was an operating income loss of $3,733,000 and a negative net income of $6,155,000. The final thing that these bills would provide you is some kind of viability to determine whether the GCI program is really the best expenditure of money. We're not telling you shut down the program now, but I am suggesting to you that we need help to level the playing field. I'm going to conclude with just telling you that if you removed these prohibitions, the one is the mandated purchase, and you also had a true picture of what the GCI program was like through the reform measure, you're going to preserve the program while having more genuine free market training. You're going to incentivize GCI to produce better products with truly competitive pricing. You're going to increase private sector business opportunities in a sluggish economy. You're going to provide state agencies with quality products at market prices, resulting in better stewardship of the taxpayer dollars that you're up here to protect. You're going to increase state funds by generating the tax revenue that we talked about through the payment of employment taxes. You're going to create and retain jobs, and you're going to keep people off the unemployment rolls. You're going to reduce government interference in the free market, and you're going to provide a measurement of effectiveness of the GCI program. As the speakers have said before me, we out in the private sector need your help. And we're not asking for a hand up or even a handout or anything. What we're asking for is remove the obstacles from government out of our way. We'll take care of ourselves. Business has, and the private sector has much better solutions, as you all know, than the government does when it tries to get into private sector business. So we need your help. I'd ask for your consideration of those measures and for help in helping us generate money so that you guys can help the citizens of Georgia more effectively.
Thank you, and we have several questions, as you could probably guess. We'll start.
Is there any kind of limit on the kinds of questions, Mr. Chairman, they're allowed to ask me?
I'm getting a little
nervous.
There may be a little hazing for a former member here.
And no, this is not my first bill.
Representative Peake.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Levitas, it's good to see you.
It's good to see you as well.
We've missed you.
Thank you. I miss you guys as well.
Glad to have you back here with us. I guess my question, is this an issue that has just come up recently that you've been dealing with? Because, I mean, you were known for the prolific Levitas legislative package every year, and we never saw this legislation in any of those hundreds of bills that you introduced annually.
Actually, there was a bill.
It was another one that went down in flames, like the rest of yours?
We'd have to talk to the sponsor, Representative Lunsford. Representative Lunsford had this bill, and it made it out of committee, but it made it out of committee after it got gutted, essentially turned on its head. So it was better. It was putting us in a worse position by the time it got out of that particular committee. So we decided it was better to let the bill die than to pass that out.
Okay. Well, we appreciate you being here, Dale. We appreciate your insight.
And if you would like to carry this bill, I'd certainly have a copy prepared.
Representative Beverly.
I have, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have three quick questions. Number one, you keep referring to GCI as a monopoly. Is there another opportunity to actually gain raw materials or materials from another company, which would not necessarily make it a monopoly, but sort of an oligopoly, right? So is GCI the only place where you can get, I suspect, raw materials to do what you need to do?
No, sir. The problem is not with raw materials. It's the finished product. State law says that a state agency has to purchase from GCI, so therefore they're the only player in the market.
Okay. Second question is there an agency that already exists that would do sort of the regulatory oversight for what you're...
For GCI?
Correct.
In theory, GCI is under the umbrella, although it's operated as a separate corporation with the Department of Corrections, although it's a little bit like having the fox guard the hen house. They're also exempt from the Georgia Administrative Procedures Act. Now, I will say that when this bill first came up several years ago, it was a different director, and I have not spoken with the current director. There was actually no objection in a hearing on this bill that I'm proposing about moving the mandates from the Department of Corrections. I can't tell you whether that's still true, but that was their position back in 2009.
Okay, thanks. And last question, the referral to the negative net income, was that before earnings, depreciation, and taxes, or was it after?
What I've got, actually, if you'd like to look, I've brought copies of the actual audit, and it will give you all that information. Okay. And I will tell you, I'm a simple chemical salesman, not an accountant, so I'd have to rely on Chairman Knight for that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, so you're saying that they're operating at a loss and the state's giving them money. What do they do with the income that they're generating from the finished goods that they're selling?
Well, they are charged with paying for the program. How they do that with a multi-million-dollar loss, I don't know. I was never on the Appropriations Committee. Obviously, if my company had a $9 million loss, we'd be shuttered up and I'd be going back to the practice of law. So the answer is I have no idea. Somehow, I don't know whether they're moving money from corrections over there or whether it's a direct appropriation from the state to keep them afloat, but they've been operating at a loss for many, many years.
Do you know if their prices are higher than the market or lower, where they're at with that?
I mean, it's difficult to say because there is no market. We don't get an opportunity to go in there and compare our pricing with it. But again, even if it's lower, you have to ask two questions. It's really a best value question. Does the product do what the product's supposed to do, and what price does it do? For example, I can sell you a product that may be cheaper, ready to use, but if a concentrated version of that dilutes down, it's going to be much cheaper. Or if I sell you a floor finish that chips off after a month or so, that's not really doing its job. So that's why you're comparing somewhat apples to oranges. What I can tell you is when our sales reps go into the field and try and talk to these folks, they will tell us often, I love what your product does. This product isn't doing what I need it to do, but my hands are tied, and I'm not going to get fired by ordering your product. and technically they'd be violating state law to do so.
Thank you.
Colleague, thank you. I think you probably sparked some interest here and something that I think this committee will definitely look at.
Thank you, Mr.
So,
Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity.
And I know you had gathered some material. If you could make sure that this committee has a copy
Absolutely.
of it, and we probably want to call you back and as we delve into this.
I'd be glad to. And if you can tell me where to sign up for Governor-elect Carter's campaign, I'd also like an opportunity to volunteer. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. And I apologize. We are, our presenters. I want to make sure we have ample time for everyone to, they've taken their time out of their schedule to come here and hear them. But we are falling them behind a little bit. So I'm going to try to make sure that we try to adhere to maybe 5-minute presentation and then leave 5 minutes or so for questioning, just simply because of the number of people who have showed up today. So with that, our next presenter, Alan, and is it Deaton? It's Dayton. My apologies, sir. Dayton. Okay. Mr. Dayton, if you will, tell us a little bit about you and the issue that you're concerned with.
Well, first of all, I do appreciate you listening to my complaint. I'm Alan Dayton. I'm the owner of a driving school, New London School of Driving in Loganville. My complaint is against the Georgia Department of Labor, who I felt we had defeated in 1945. We specialize in teenage driver education. That's all we do. So most of our driving is in the evening and at weekends. Consequently, we hire a number of school bus drivers because of they like kids, they're trained and all this sort of thing, and they come on board as self-employed contractors. We had one of them that was using our cars constantly, going to the lot, taking the cars, using them for personal use, and a number of other things, and we stopped using him. He went to the Georgia Department of Labor and applied for unemployment benefits and got them as a 1099. The Georgia Department of Labor came at me and said everyone has to be W-2, whatever it is, and that would have bankrupted us. I took the Georgia Department of Labor to the appeals court, and the appeals court sided with us. This person then went back to the Georgia Department of Labor, made another appeal so he didn't have to pay back the unemployment benefits he's got. They said they couldn't do that. But they advised him to take them to Superior Court and sue them in Superior Court. And they wrote a very favorable memorandum to him. And I believe the idea was if they lost in court, then I lost. They also, in that, and I have it, it's documented, they also put an appendix in for the judge, asking the judge that if this person lost the case, they didn't have to pay back their unemployment benefits because he didn't have any money, even though he owns about $1 million worth of land in Snellville. He has his own business. He has a couple of Harley Davidsons, and they still gave him unemployment benefits, even though he was a 1099. That whole process took me about a year to fight it. I think I made nearly every attorney in Atlanta rich that year. We had, I think, 3 different attorneys, specialized attorneys working on different parts of it, because we were also taken to the Workers' Comp Court. My request is that there is more oversight on some of these government agencies. I was subpoenaed to appear before an official, and she never turned up. This is my time, my money, and I spent a very worrying year, because I could have gone out of business if they'd have won. But there was no concern on the part of the Georgia Department of Labor at all for my business. They didn't care what damage they did. They just went ahead and did it. And we went through the Superior, this chappie took us to Superior Court in Monroe, and they read it and threw it out. So I don't know the final conclusion, but my request is that I'm a small business, a very small business, and that would have put me out of business. And I think there should be some recourse when a government agency does that sort of thing. Not, you will appear, and if you don't appear, we're going to cut your fingers off. I mean, that's the type of attitude that they have. And there's no, I'm sorry, we made a mistake.
Mr. Dayton, this is certainly disturbing. I mean, on the surface of what you've told us. When did this happen?
This happened a couple of years ago, and
Okay.
I have all the documentation here from the department. I have the letter they wrote this Mueller person to present to the Superior Court, where they're advising him to sue them, which he did. He actually sued the Georgia Department of Labor.
So what I'm hearing is we had a government agency asking someone to sue.
Another government agency.
Man, I'm certainly glad you have brought this to our attention. I'm sure there may be some comments or questions on this issue. Anyone? What 26? Representative
Yes,
Braddock.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, yeah, that is kind of alarming. So, will you be providing us with your documentation?
It's
That
all
would
here.
be good. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That's all I wanted to know is can we get that, unravel this?
Yeah, I think this.
See, I wasn't grey until this started.
I would appreciate very much for you to leave that because I'm sure that this committee, I personally would like to look into that. First of all, I'm like you. I'm not sure how that someone who is self-employed could come in and file for unemployment benefits.
And also
such.
owning a business as well.
Yes.
I believe that's against state law too.
So I would appreciate. We do have a question. 25, Representative Bruce.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I'm clear on something. In this particular instance, the work that the person was doing, was that person doing work that was totally under your control?
To an extent.
What does that mean?
Well, it means they make their own schedule. They work when they want to. If they didn't want to work, they didn't have to. State law actually allows instructors to work for two driving companies. It also allows them to use their own vehicles, and they had that option if they wanted to do it.
So technically, because the definition of whether you get overtime or not, basically is what it is.
Yeah.
That's defined by federal law, not state law. And so I was just trying to figure out if the person was in fact doing work independently.
No.
And as such, if they were doing the work independently, then I would understand your concern. But if you were controlling that person's day-to-day going and coming and what work they did and all this other kind of stuff, then they would be entitled. And that's why I'm trying to make sure I understand.
No, they set their own schedule. They work as and when they want to. We do
Okay.
not tell them to work. We don't tell them when to come in. They do their own schedule.
Okay. And is that by contract or?
Contract. We have the self-employed contract that they sign.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dayton, thank you. I'm very pleased that you have brought this before us.
Well, I'm certainly pleased you listened to me. Thank
and
you.
if you would, I would appreciate you leaving that file for us to look into that issue. Thank you. Next, Mary Moore is. Thank you for staying. I understand you're on a bit of a schedule conflict. So, Mary, if you will, tell us a little bit about yourself and your issue.
Thank you. I'm Mary Moore, and I own retail stores called the Cook's Warehouse. They're gourmet stores and cooking schools. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today, and I'm very impressed that Speaker Ralston put together the Red Tape Watch initiative. It gives me hope, and it's exciting to know that y'all are really looking into some of these issues. I'm a native Georgian. I grew up on a farm just west of Atlanta in between Douglasville and Hiram. Cooked my way through college at Georgia State University, and that's where I got the idea to open the Cook's Warehouse. Felt like there needed to be a great resource for cookware and kitchen accessories, and wanted people to cook better at home. So I started after I was turned down 8 times by large banks and wound up getting an SBA loan with Bank Atlanta to get started. My grandmother co-signed on it, so I couldn't fail, right? Very motivated and very passionate about what I do. So I've been doing this for almost 17 years, and I have grown from one small store to now 4 brick and mortar stores and an online business as well. And I have 75, I believe, employees now, after starting with 2.5. And I put everything on the line to make this business work. I think that's what small business people do, and it's a passion and it's a dedication that's different from people who aren't running their own businesses. I'm also very involved in the community. I'm on the board of the Atlanta Community Food Bank and the Metro Atlanta Chamber, and I chair the Small Business Council there. And I think it's wonderful to learn from other people and to give back and to do as much as we can to be good stewards. The reason I'm here today is because for 14 and a half years, I never had an audit. In the last 2 years, I've had 5 audits. I had a wage and hour audit, Form 8083, which I understand is federal, workers' comp, sales and use tax, and property tax. We keep excellent records, and the outcome of all of these was perfect except for the sales and use tax, which is mainly what I'd like to talk about. By the auditor's own admission, quote, she said, "There's no way for businesses to know all of the intricacies of what's involved in paying sales and use tax." By way of example, my businesses are in different tax districts, so one's at 6, 2 are at 7, one's at 8%. If I purchase something from myself to use in another store, I owe the difference in tax, whether it's 1%, 2%, whatever those differences could be. If I make purchases at Sam's or Costco for things for the school, then I also owe the difference in tax. And my understanding is they have, of course they have big legal departments, they have tax departments, and they've negotiated with the state to pay a tax that is different and is to a different standard of what we have to pay. So most people who go in and they purchase things and they pay their sales tax assume that it's done, that they're doing what they need to do, right? And so apparently that's not the case. So I did owe some money at the end of that, and what I wound up paying was double what I actually owed after the interest and penalties and things were put on. At the end of the day, it wasn't a huge amount of money, but it really wasn't at all over the course of 3 years, which is what they do. But what it cost more than that was 60 hours of my personal time, 30 plus hours of one of my team members' times to pull all of the records and then to refile everything after it was done. And it's really stressful to go through an audit too, because even when you keep great records, you never know what the outcome's going to be. It took a month and a half to go through that. And these other audits I had also they didn't take the same amount of time as the sales and use tax, but they all took a good bit of my time, finding all the paperwork, putting everything together, sitting down with the auditor and going through it. So I think that, the return on the investment for the state, the auditor also told me that they had hired 400 new auditors because they're going out and I guess essentially on a witch hunt to find some money because the state needs a lot more money. I think reforming the taxes, reforming sales and use tax, and reforming what we have, don't make it 200 pages that we all have to understand, know, and adhere to every day. Make it a simple system so that we can easily abide by it. I don't think there are many small business people, and I don't know them, that actually don't want to do the right thing. I mean, we're in business to make money, we want to be successful, and we want to participate. So I'm happy to do what I'm required to do, but she also suggested I go to the school at the Department of Revenue or their classes. But quite frankly, I don't have time to go to class at the Department of Revenue to understand hundreds of pages of code. It shouldn't be that difficult. I need to be in my business. I need to be working with my employees and focused on my products and opening new locations, understanding my market, and creating jobs. And so I'm looking for a simpler system. I wear most of the hats in my company. Other than that, I think that along with the overhaul of state and local tax regulation, I'd like for you to consider a couple of other items. A central point of contact for regulatory requirements and compliance information. If you have ever tried to go out to all the different government websites to actually find a form or find what you're looking for or to understand what you actually need to do, it's very difficult to maneuver. And if there was a more centralized system, it could be very efficient. Create a consolidated permitting process for new facilities and infrastructure. I, like Mr. Taylor, fell prey to the water fountain issue with my new location that I just opened. Even though we sell water filtration systems and provide water and free coffee and anything our customers might need, we also had to have that water fountain. Another idea is to create a hiring incentive and for on-the-job hiring incentives and on-the-job training programs. I think that could be very successful, and to stabilize the state's unemployment insurance system. In the last year, I have had 5 people deny employment with me because they were making more money on unemployment. So even someone that went so far as to take the job in the morning she was supposed to start called and said, you know, I figured out that I'm making more money on unemployment, so I'm just going to not come in today. So people are improperly motivated. And just to emphasize what the gentleman previous to me was talking about, I've also had not very many, thank goodness, we don't have a lot of turnover, but I have had a couple of instances with employees who haven't been the right fit for our company and for great cause, and the difficulty of dealing with the Department of Labor is very onerous. Recently, I had an employee who had clearly broken several policy violations that are in our handbook, which is written and stated, and again, we're dotting our I's and crossing our T's, but he made some very offensive comments to a fellow employee. Because that person wasn't on the phone when we did our hearing, that was hearsay. And because he chose to lie about what he actually did, he won. And then when I went to appeal it, I couldn't submit any further information. So if there were some real clear information about everything that you need going into the process, because the piece of paper that you get that has some codes on it, it's not very clear at all, and it certainly doesn't say, if you need to appeal this in the future, you can never submit anything additional. So you have to have every person involved, every piece of paper involved, anything involved going into that process to start with. That could also be very helpful. And then finally, perhaps limiting the number of audits that a business would be required to go through in a given year. I mean, I know that things have to be checked, but 5 in really a year and a half was very difficult and really took me out of the business in ways that are detrimental. And then perhaps if there's a model of a business has been through X number of audits and they've been clean or mostly clean, maybe there's an indication for great business practice, and then that business might be looked at differently in the future for audits, because if you're looking for money, you're likely not going to find it with a business that keeps great records and runs a solid business. I mean, I'm sure there's some out there where it would be very easy to occur a windfall. But if a business has great business practices over time, then maybe they're looked at a little differently when the audit process comes around. Thank you very much.
Well, Mrs. Moore, I thank you for coming in and telling this. As a CPA, I'm sort of appalled at the amount of time that this is taken. You said 60 hours and 30 hours of a employee's time. That is the burden that is placed on businesses. Unfortunately, we do have to have compliance. There are people out there who will cheat, but it is such a drain on the resources of businesses that are trying to do it right. And I appreciate you coming in and sharing with us. I know we have a few questions that the members would like to ask. Okay. Representative Pete.
Yeah, just real quick, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Moore, thank you for being here. I tell you, this is some great stuff. I'm in the restaurant business, and so we may be competing a little bit because you're running that kitchenware so folks will eat at home. But but best of luck to you. I hope there's enough business out there for both of us. Yes. I own 19 restaurants across the state, and I have just been through an audit myself, sales tax audit. So I understand and feel your pain because it was difficult, not only time-wise and to my pocketbook as well too. So, but I just want to take the opportunity to thank you for your input. This is really good stuff. That's you are the prototypical small business that we need to be doing everything we can to make sure you are spending more time in your business and not with auditors. So I appreciate you being here today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Representative Harden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Midmore again. Appreciate you being here. A couple of things. It sounds like the 400 auditors may have been a plus, because if you hadn't been audited in 5 years, that made your audit much worse. And you did assume, I think, wound up with the fact that if more frequent audits of businesses and then less frequent as they become clear that those businesses are doing it right. Mm-hmm. But so what I think, though, I get from this is the regulations just need to be simplified to the point where it's not so hard to audit and not so hard for you to put the materials together. Is that?
Absolutely.
All right. So we're not at a disagreement about the regulations are needed, but basically on how complicated it is to prepare for an audit.
Absolutely. I mean, okay. Obviously we need regulations and we need compliance, and auditing is a way to follow up with all of that. But having a system and having regulations that are extremely clear, they're understandable, they're written in a way that, you know, anybody who's going to get into business can understand them and do the right thing, instead of having them so complex that you either have to pay an attorney or a CPA or someone prohibitive amounts of money to figure it out, or it just takes too much time.
Yeah, and that was another thing, and that is right, because small businesses can't always afford that right. Full-time CPA, a full-time attorney on retainer to do this for them. So
that's correct.
Appreciate you very much.
I have neither of those on retainer.
Thank you for your testimony, and I don't know if you have any information that you could share with your experience, the detail of the hours. I am also particularly interested in your Department of Labor experience.
Okay, sure.
I think that's probably an example of what a lot of small businesses are experiencing across the state, and certainly this is the second time in this hearing, our first hearing, to hear from folks across the state that's an example where we need to look at. So, and I do. What was your quote? Your quote at the beginning, that, you know, small businesses, they put everything on the line, they can't fail.
That's right.
I think that's a great illustration of why we're here, and I appreciate it. And I know my mother-in-law was into one of your stores the other day, and I think took a cooking class. So
thank you
and
for
I'm
your
supposed
business.
to go back. I'm supposed to go back to one with her sometime this month. So maybe it's there, but I know she enjoyed your store very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
We have one more question. Is that Representative Braddock?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, it's just a comment with what you've said about the Department of Labor. As a small business person, I've also run into things, and it may be helpful if we look at putting together like a simple handbook, because I know just going through the process of creating a handbook, you know, takes a lot of time. And but I mean, real basic things like, you know, employee theft is not a reason for denying unemployment, yet it should be. So having real fundamental basic things like that, you know, in a handbook that we could provide to small businesses that are, you know, in the young stages, might be something that we could look at as an idea. I don't know if you've ever had that situation, but there are some real fundamental things that...
Right. That are difficult. I did have a situation where a person just wasn't doing their job correctly and was violating some policies and wasn't effective in their position, and they were let go. And I think the verbiage was something like they can't do their job. They're not capable of doing their job, therefore they can collect unemployment. And I thought, well, gosh, maybe I can get hired as a brain surgeon, and then they can later figure out I can't do my job, but then I can collect that unemployment. That would be great. So some of it seems a little ridiculous. And I was also told by a Department of Labor worker on the phone that because Georgia is a right-to-work state, that 9 times out of 10 or 99 times out of 100, they're always going to give to the employee. And that's just not right. That shouldn't be the attitude that they have. It should always be a fair review on a case-by-case basis.
Well, and I think, too, the hours you have to put into going through the appeals process, taking your employees off of their job to prove that, you know, if it was theft or, you know, they were violating the rules or they just weren't capable of doing the job, just that whole burden of proof is, I think, difficult in working with the Department of Labor. So thank you for your feedback.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Just one real quick thing, because I'm listening to this. I've been in HR for 30 years, and one of the things that I've learned in HR is that there's two sides, probably three sides to every story. So I just, while I understand we need to reduce all of the burdens, that we can, we also have to make sure that we have protections in for the employee too. Because we have some employers, not suggesting you by any means, that would say, okay, what is the reason that I can put on this form so that I don't have to pay this unemployment? And we have people that will do that. I've seen them do it. So I just want to make sure that we look at this in a balanced way, that the employee should also have protections to make sure that they're not denied something that they're entitled to or need because somebody is trying to get out of paying it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I completely agree. And if there's a way to maintain fairness on all sides, then that's absolutely the way it should be. Perhaps on the other side, if there are employers who are habitual in sort of doing things the way they should not do, then they get on another checklist that gets audited more often.
I wasn't suggesting that was happening in your place.
No,
I'm
I
just
understand.
saying, but the dialogue is I just don't want us to get skewed.
Yeah.
We have to look at both sides to make sure that everybody's treated fairly and it is balanced.
Sure, I agree with you. And I think at the end of the day, we as small business people really need to be motivated to stay in business, to grow our businesses, and to create more jobs, because we are the backbone of the economy. And when you have to worry about what's going to happen when I get my 100th employee, because it feels daunting and there are all these other things that I'm going to have to comply with and things that I'm going to have to do, it's sending an odd message. For my employees to succeed and do well in my corporation, I try to lift them up and educate them and take them along and coach them and guide them. And maybe the same for small business leaders, that there's more opportunity for positive and with simplification of the system than some of the roadblocks that we run into.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your testimony, and we certainly appreciate it. I look forward to coming in the store.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Huh? You don't want to keep cooking. No. I'm a good cook. Yeah. Let me add, I noticed on our list, is there somebody from the Valdosta Chamber of Commerce, the Farmers Furniture here? I want to make sure, that was down on the list. I want to make sure we're taking care of those folks who have traveled a great distance. Okay. And all right, and I also noticed Russell Wilder. Is there Russell Wilder from Evans here? Okay. All right. Carl Pearl. It's Carl. Carl, welcome, and if you will, tell the committee a little bit about yourself and the regulations you've been faced with.
First, committee, thank you for seeing me. I am Carl Pearl. I am Vice President of Aventus Systems in Marietta, Georgia. Aventus Systems is a IT hardware company. We do roughly $12 million in hardware, IT hardware, nationally. We have 26 employees. My reason for coming here today is when trying to work with the state of Georgia, again, we do new and refurbished hardware. On every state contract, it says that the hardware has to be new or you have to be a certified OEM distributor. When you look at hardware, the hardware it's not about like you guys have Dell laptops. The Dell laptop that you get, it's not about is it new, it's about functionality and quality. When we get our hardware in, when it's refurbished, we bring in the hardware, we test it, we take that hardware, we test it to the OEM spec. If it fails, we will then discard that hardware. We also take, if you look at a server today, it comes in, there's three main components. The motherboard, motherboard, CPU, hard drives, and the memory. If any of those fail, we remove them immediately. So now we've tested it, we validated that the hardware meets the OEM spec, we put that server on the shelf. When we get a call, we ship that we bring it down, we test it again, make sure that it does meet the spec that the customer's looking for, and then we ship it out. If there's a failure, we will service that hardware for 3 years. It's covered under our warranty. So if you have a failure, we'll replace a part, component, or the entire server, or a laptop, computer, or Cisco hardware. The state of Georgia, however, and when you look, let me go to the federal level first. The federal government actually has a GSA contract for refurbished hardware. So they will accept refurbished hardware. The state of Georgia does not. Okay. And at the local levels, there are some local municipalities that will accept refurbished hardware, but most of them will tell us that they only accept it because it's a non-critical function. And we're just asking that you work with the buyers, and we don't even know if it's a regulation or if it's just perception as to whether or not the hardware can be accepted as refurbished. We just see it on the contract, and every time we ask a buyer, will they speak to the engineer, they say, well, no, we won't ask. And we struggle with that because we're able to save our customers 30 to 50% off of new. And when you look at that, I was in a meeting held by the Technology Association of Georgia last week. The state is trying to implement an ERP system, or MR, and we're saying there are $3 to $4 million that we need to do this, and yet we won't look at refurbished hardware. We really struggle with why the state won't look at that as a viable option in the IT space. When you look at, excuse me, our hardware inventory in the state of Georgia by the Georgia Technology Authority, last year they spent $1 billion in IT, in that department. Of that, $187 million went to IT infrastructure operations, and $185 million was spent on projects. If you look at what's in the inventory, you're talking about 20,000 workstations. You're talking about 6,500 laptops, 1,500 Windows-based servers, and we're talking about 1,600 network devices, and that's anywhere from switches, routers, to security appliances. And you say to yourself, if you want to refresh your network or make changes, why would you not consider a refurbished piece of hardware to do that? Because again, you're getting the same quality, you're getting the warranty, but yet we've not considered it. And the state is asking for savings, and where can we save? The private industry, when you look at our space, one of my competitors was just most recently purchased by Avnet. Avnet is a tier 1 distributor. The question is, why would they acquire this company? Because they can help them with their with the data center takeouts from these larger enterprise companies, and they can rehash or refurbish that hardware and resell it. So it becomes another way to extend the life cycle of the hardware and extend the sales cycle for them. I'm interested in why the state just won't even look at that regulation.
Well, that's a great question. I guess my question goes back, and you touched on it briefly, is the refurbished component quality versus a new component. Obviously, there's a big cost difference. My second thought on that is technology changes. If you've got a 3 or 4 year window, you've probably outlived the useful life or technology life of that particular component. You speak to that.
So let me address that. It's funny. Life is a game of chess, I think, a lot of times, and this question is posed to us when we talk to new customers. When you look at a server's hardware, you're right, it's 3 to 5 years. When you look at CPUs change consistently. They're upgraded over time. So let's work with, just going to go with Dell, for instance. Dell's 9 series server was the workhorse. It was the best server that ever came out. And they just recently went last year to a letter series, but let's stay on the 9 series for a moment. That 9 series server, when it came out, could only do what we call dual core CPUs. That's only 2 CPUs, or a CPU with 2 cores. So now, over time, the CPUs have changed. That 9 series server can now do 16 core capability. You can actually virtualize on top of it. So what does that mean? That means I can do more with less and still lower your costs. But when it came out and on the spec sheet said 2 cores, that was the max. So now the 4 cores, the 8 cores, and the 16 cores can be used on that hardware. So we've done it, we've tested it. Dell has tested it. So we're actually matching their specifications. So let me go to the refurbished process, though, because I think that was your initial question. When you look at the servers themselves, when we get them in, again, 4 major areas that fail: motherboard, CPU, hard drive, memory. CPU, memory, hard drive, we take out. That's removed. Basically, what we're testing is the motherboard. We want to make sure that it's viable. If it passes the OEM inspection, we'll put it on the shelf. If it fails, we'll discard that motherboard and buy a new one and replace it. So now you have a new motherboard. The chassis goes on the shelf. Customer calls in, places an order. We bring that server down, we put in new memory, new CPU, new hard drives, test to the OEM spec again, and then we ship it out with a 3-year warranty. So you're getting a new server at the time that you actually purchased it. It is refurbished, but the components inside it are new. So it's the same as if you go get a tune-up on your car. You replace the oil filter, the air filter, and the spark plugs. There's no reason to replace the engine.
Well, thank you. Certainly, in times of budget crisis, anything that we can do to look at saving money, certainly this is a large expenditure for the state. So we do have a question. Representative Harden.
Just a very quick question. Do you have any statistics on the amount of downtime on new as compared to refurbished? Because I know downtime is real expensive, and
it is critical. So when we look at our RMAs, and that's how we measure it. Right now, we run on our failure we measure 3 areas. A sales order entry error, we have less than 2% of an error rate there. And then on the warranty side, so under warranty, we have less than 2.5% come back for failure for warranty. So to downtime, if you look at 12.5 million in sales over a 3-year window that we've been in business, and we're seeing annual increases in our revenue. We started at year 1 was around 600,000, year 2 was a little over 6 million, year 3 was 9, and last year we did 12.5. This year I'm targeted at 15. So we're seeing repeat customers. We have customers in the state of North Carolina, so we do business with the state of North Carolina. We do business with the state of California. We do business with the state of Oregon. We do business with the state of Kentucky. Specifically, we have at failure rate, we really measure that. That's quality is key to us. It's what's going to maintain our business long term.
Representative Clark.
Earl, I appreciate thank you for coming out and sharing this with us. I think we're all, as Representative Harden mentioned, we're all about saving money here and these tight budget times. You sound like you're pretty confident in the ability of the refurbished equipment that you have. Would you be willing to demonstrate that by perhaps donating some laptops to our CLOB? These laptops right here, I think are about 10 years old. Anything you had that's refurbished, I'm sure we'd be impressed with.
To give you an idea, we participate with the Technology Association of Georgia, and one of their groups that we sponsor is the Entrepreneur Society. And so we do donate to them. We donated over $2,000 in hardware every year to that group. With Hosea Feed the Hungry, we gave them a server as well. We also sold them several laptops. So if the state needs laptops, we will donate a few if we need to show our quality. I really don't have any issues with that. That's if that were something that would open the door for us, I think that would be a no-brainer on our side. So again. The big thing that we're asking the committee to do is when you look at the Georgia Technology Authority, they outsource right now to IBM. And then what they do is they subcontract that laptops and desktops to Dell. So it's almost impossible for us to have inroads with that department. So we're asking that you look at your different departments, because some departments will buy independently, and those departments we can help. But right now, because they outsource to IBM and Dell, it's hard to have a major impact there. I would say that if given the opportunity, we could definitely show them cost savings.
And I think that would be very much appreciated. So, all right. Well, thank you so much for coming. And if you do have any a summary or any additional information, please let the committee.
I do have a written statement I could provide to.
That would be great.
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Committee, thank you for your time. And again, it's primarily on the contracts when they're written that it says has to be new or a certified distributor. So if you can get that language taken out or even just evaluated, that's something that would help us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Real quick, I know that we still have a lot of folks, and time is of essence here. I'm going to take a quick roll call of the folks who I have still on the list to make sure they're here, so we have an exact number of folks who are still here to speak. Lonnie Leslie, still here? Okay. All right. And Rashid Brown, is he here? Okay. Kenny King. Kenny's here. Daniel Young. Daniel Young. John White. John's here. Stephen Lloyd Guy. Stephen Lloyd Guy. Rita Bass. And David Iwan, not here. Okay. All right, we have 4 left. Well, we should be fine on time then. Lonnie Leslie, please come up. Mr. Leslie, tell us about yourself and your business and the issue you're having.
Okay. First of all, I'd say thank you for the opportunity. I am a resident in this district of Roger Bruce, so I appreciate and want to publicly thank Roger for the support and the effort that he gives our community and his district to keep us up to speed and keep us in front and informed. So I appreciate that. My name is Lonnie Leslie. I am a small business owner, just ramped up a small business here in the Atlanta area. I ran a productive and profitable small business in Los Angeles for 15 years. I'm in the IT arena. And what we've done, I moved here because I wanted a better lifestyle for my family and also to start a business here in Atlanta. I partnered with one of my associates, and we are VoIP Telecom LLC. We just established. The principals have over 50 years combined experience in sales and consultative sales experience in telecom and information technology systems. We have worked for companies like AT&T, Xerox, and we have serviced companies like the county, city, and federal government, Equifax, Boeing Aircraft, Lockheed, the Assurant Group, Home Depot, ING, Bank of America, Coca-Cola, just to mention a few. So my point is we are qualified to deliver great products and services in the Atlanta metropolitan area. We've developed partnerships with key local service providers because we're a small company, and obviously being in telecom and IT, we don't have the resources and can't afford to hire the resources to do these things ourselves. So we've partnered with some of these guys to provide best-in-class hosted and customer premise-based telecom and IT managed services for small businesses. Now, my position on it is this. Most small businesses have a problem with one of the, or with a combination of the following: is limited funding, little to no referenceable clients, little to no market presence, and limited resources. And when I talk about resources, I'm talking about personnel, primarily, qualified personnel. Now, some of these things I don't think are really an issue for the committee. Some of these things you don't want to really address. For instance, limited funding, I won't bring that one up right now. That's what it is. But one of the things I wanted to talk about, and I wanted to follow this gentleman because he mentioned it a couple of times. One of the things that gets a small business off the ground quickly is city, county, local government business tied to RFPs, RFQs, that kind of thing. If you can qualify and you can play, it'll get your business off the ground. I had an experience in California where I was allowed to tie to a major manufacturer, one of the companies that I represented, They, in fact, positioned my company as the small business entity that allowed them to play in a major government contract. We won a multi-million-dollar deal that really, skyrocketed my business and really kicked my business into another level. That allowed my business to stay alive and well for over 15 years. It also gave me credibility and instant recognition. Now, my company doesn't fly a flag like an IBM or a Xerox and AT&T, but when you are talking to prospects and you let them know, hey, I've done business with the state, I've done business with Boeing Aircraft, that gives you credibility. So a small business has got to find a way to get a foot in the door so that you can begin to service some companies so you can gain your credibility. One of the ways that you want to do that is to certify as a minority business, which brings me to my point. Certification needs to be streamlined so that it can be a lot easier for guys like us. We don't have 2 years of financial statements to present. I've worked with small businesses since I've been here in Georgia that tout themselves as small businesses with millions of dollars in cash and assets, which leads me to believe that if you got the money, you can probably buy whatever you need to buy. You can buy a meeby-weeby certification. So my concern is that we need to have a process that will allow a business like ours to get quickly certified. I think the clearinghouse is Minority Supplier Diversity Council today. You want to get through that and get minority certification so that you can become a player. I talked about some of the other issues that small businesses are faced with. Once you can get in and get some business, you have referenceable accounts. You have actually we can use some reference selling. One of the things that I talked about was multiple years of financial statements. I was looking at some of the stuff that they require. We're not going to have that. We're not going to have prior 2 years tax returns for a business. I would like to think that if you could do a criminal background on the principals to make sure that there are no issues there, you can do you can get someone's social security number and find out anything that you need to know about that person or that principal. So I think that we should take a look at some of those kinds of things, to look at the resumes of the principals, to see if in fact you can expedite the minority certification process. I've seen companies that also hide behind the minority certification piece by simply making 51%, making the owner a 51%, or making the female a 51% owner, or something like that. So those are little loopholes in the system that they use to get minority certification when you got companies like ours that are legitimately minority-owned small businesses that have a more difficult time to get that done. The last bullet I wanted to make, one of the young ladies mentioned a little earlier, a single point of reference. When I started my other business, I became 8A certified, and that was good for everybody, for all city, county, local entities, and I didn't have to go through a whole lot of other documentation. In the 15 years that I was running my business, I was audited one time. So it really encourages small businesses to get involved and become players. I think that this committee is a solid approach to it, because you want to do is to peel away some of that red tape so that you can encourage companies like ours to get out there and generate business and possibly offer some opportunity for some others to gain some work.
Well, thank you, Mr. Leslie. And first of all, thank you for coming to Georgia. I appreciate that, and I know the rest of us do. And I hope you find this a good place to be and to do business. So,
Hopefully I will.
Well, with that, we do have a few questions. 23. Is that Representative Peake?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Leslie. I again echo Chairman Knight's welcome to Georgia. Glad to have you here. So, quick question, and I don't know much about the process for minority certification, but you said the difficulty was in being able to provide some financial history, or would they not accept prior year tax returns on you personally or for your business that you had for 15 years before? Was that not acceptable?
No. And I think that what they're looking for to establish as a minority vendor is some history with that company or with the company that you are certifying. And see, there's no real history.
Even though you were a owner of a business previously, they wouldn't accept that?
That's correct.
Okay. It's interesting. Something we ought to fix.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Down the line, Representative Bruce.
Just wanted to thank you for participating in this hearing, and tell everybody I say hi.
I will. I will.
Any other questions from the committee? One more, Representative Harden.
All right. Very quickly, though, have you looked at bidding for some state contracts?
No.
All right. And so, but if you do, basically, it sounded like to me the contracts you had looked at, you had to have a certain financial record and all, and they won't accept your previous business. Is that?
That's correct. And then the other bullet is this: there are details within the RFPs that suggest we need some referenceable accounts. Show us where you've done this with someone else. My position on it is we are partnered with other companies that have been doing this in Atlanta for a number of years. Why can't we use their references, or why can't we tie ourselves to what they've been capable of, able to do? Because that's what we're going to do from a business perspective anyway.
Have you talked to any of them about being a subcontractor on a larger contract?
Yes, that's primarily the way we're trying to position ourselves now.
Okay.
But that does not do much for us in terms of our business and visibility and credibility.
Okay.
Yeah, Representative Peake.
They would not allow you to be able to use a reference from somebody in California for that? Again, it has to be the specific business that you're applying for the certification for.
Well, the reference that we want to use, let me be specific. We are tied to a company that based here has a couple of data centers in downtown Atlanta called Broad River Communications. They're stable. They've been here for a while. Why can't we use their references, if you would? Because we are representing them. We have established our partnership with them. So they see us as a player based upon what we've brought to the table.
But the real issue is that the certification process would not allow, unless you had a track record with the specific entity that you were trying to get certified, and wouldn't look at any of your background or history or experience.
We're talking about two different things. You're talking about the certification process. We're talking about a response to an RFP.
Well, could it also, Representative Peake, also be in reference to maybe his prior experience in California with a successful 15-year business?
Yeah, there. I mean, gosh, it just seems like it's crazy that they wouldn't look at that. I mean, if you've got a track record of both financial, from references standpoint, too, I mean, that's crazy. Something we need to.
That may have been more where I was thinking anyway.
Yeah, the bid process is the one that is the big one, and that is how do we get our foot in the door? And I wanted to follow this gentleman because two things, and I'm done. The GTA, Georgia Technology Authority, has contracted with IBM and AT&T. IBM for the IT infrastructure, AT&T for the telecom. I visited a small county south of here to pursue them for business. They had 6 computers in one department. They sent me to another department that had 10. Now, my question to you, and they couldn't move because they were tied to Georgia Technology Authority. My question to you is, do they actually need IBM or AT&T to manage their facility?
Good question.
And the question is no. They could do it. Small business could take care of that one.
Well, first of all, Mr. Leslie, thank you. If you've got any written notes or things that you could leave with this committee, we would certainly appreciate that. And again, thank you for what you do.
Thank you guys for the opportunity.
Absolutely. It's our pleasure. All right. Moving along. Get Skinny. Make sure we're on this line. Kenny King. Mr. King, you tell a little bit about yourself and your business and your issue.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for allowing me to speak to you today. My name is Kenny King. I'm a Georgia native. I live in Gwinnett County. I'm a Georgia Tech graduate and a home builder for the last 31 years. I'm here today on behalf of my fellow Georgia home builders and the Home Builders Association of Georgia. The HBAG does not keep records of regulations as they are added to our workload. The occurrence of regulations are an insidious process. Frequently, those who have to deal with the regulations don't hear about them until they are already put into place. Once a builder provides a warm, dry, stable structure, the rest of the codes and regulations for home builders deal with or as a result of safety concerns, energy conservation, environmental issues, or the agenda of some special interest group. From studies conducted by the National Association of Home Builders, regulations comprise roughly 25% of the cost of a new home. 2/3 of that regulation cost occurs during the lot development, and the other third of the regulation cost occurs during the construction phase. Many of home building's regulations costs occur at the national level through agencies such as the EPA and OSHA, over which Georgia has no control. The building codes are developed nationally, reviewed and adopted, sometimes with amendments by the Department of Community Affairs here in Georgia, for Georgia's home building industry to follow. Whether or not we continue to adopt the latest and greatest code is a catch-22 situation. If we don't adopt the latest and greatest, that's going to add more cost to the home. We're criticized by insurance industries and consumer groups as not providing the Georgia consumer with the best that we can afford. If we do adopt them, we're going to wind up raising the price of homes to the Georgia consumers. One red tape issue that I have discovered here in Georgia just yesterday. I've been in home building for 31 years. I've never run into a home builder that had to deal with sales tax, but apparently there is on the books here in Georgia. I read a little bit of it last night, a sales tax law that requires any residential contractor or any general contractor that puts sticks and bricks together on real estate and who has a $250,000 contract with a subcontractor must file with the state and report on how much they pay that contractor every month. Now, I'm not sure I've ever met a builder who built a house that had one contractor that was getting paid $250,000. That'd probably about a $10 million house if it was. But and yet it appears that I've run into two builders here just yesterday that have received notification from the sales tax department that they're going to have to start filling out a form every month, even if it's zero, and send it in. I'm not sure that's beneficial either all the builders of Georgia or to Georgia itself to pay staff to continue to process all those forms when all they're going to have on them is zero. One particular caveat I would mention to you today is the pitfalls of Georgia accepting federal money. 3 or 4 years ago, Georgia accepted some $800 million in stimulus money. Approximately $200 million of that was energy related and required Georgia to immediately advance to the latest energy codes, which mandated an additional energy features that added approximately $2,000 to the cost of every new home. That's a cost that bankers won't recognize or fund, appraisers won't give you credit for, and the $2,000 becomes another cost a money-strapped builder has to cover out of his own pocket. That $2,000 additional cost gets multiplied by other factors, resulting sometimes in something like $2,500 to $3,000. In Georgia, during a healthy economy, when Georgia was building 95 to 100,000 homes a year, that would cost Georgia home buyers about $300 million in 1 year. So we took $200 million in stimulus money, but it cost Georgians $300 million in 1 year. If we were in a good year, we hadn't been in a good year since that took place. Every $1,000 in increased housing cost knocks 10,000 potential buyers out of the market. Energy conservation measures that take more than 5 years to pay back may have noble intentions, but are not beneficial to housing Georgians. The bulk of our regulations comes from cities and counties. Fees that are charged to fund certain aspects of the local government, but wind up fees that are charged to fund certain aspects of the local government, but wind up in another department. Impact fees that are developed without justification for the amount charged. Silt screen that is required on the uphill side of a project when water only flows downhill. Unjustifiable water and sewer tap fees. Difficulty in getting well drilling permits. Local health departments that require more stringent parameters for septic tanks than the state mandates. Local building codes that are increased over and above the state adopted codes. And stream buffers that are larger than the state mandated widths, which is basically land confiscated without compensation. In summary, I believe regulations need to be vetted for a cost-benefit analysis, published for the consuming public to see while the proposed regulation is under consideration, and possibly sunsetted to review the regulation's justification. New homes cannot compete with the depressed prices of the foreclosures in today's market. In the last 4 years in metropolitan Atlanta, we've built 10% of the houses that we were building in the good days. Statewide, we've built today we're building 1/6 of the houses we were building in good days. More stringent housing is an industry that has always brought this country out of a recession. More stringent regulations are not always a good idea.
Mr. King, I appreciate those thoughts. One of your last comments was, we can't afford in today's economy. We can't afford to build new houses. The value is not there. I know I recently was lucky enough to sell my home, and I purchased another one, but I was considering maybe trying to build a home. But in today's market, I guarantee you, once the home was completed and the appraisal process got through, it probably wouldn't appraise for what the dead cost that I had in the home. So I certainly understand exactly where you're coming from. I've got a question, and I know we had another builder earlier on in the process, and I think this goes back. You made one comment about local codes in excess of state codes. Are you building in different areas of the state, or maybe different? I'm sorry, not different areas, different maybe local jurisdictions? Are you finding problems with inconsistencies where you're having to deal with an excess code maybe in this local jurisdiction, and you go next door to a neighboring city or neighboring county, and you're finding a whole set of different codes?
It's not uncommon to be building in multiple jurisdictions, whether it be cities or counties, and yes, the state adopts a minimum building code, and everybody has to build to that, even if they live in a county where there's not even an inspection department. If they build that house, they're supposed to build it to state code. But municipalities and counties are allowed, if they follow procedure, and some follow procedure and some don't, but you're in a winless argument if you find out they didn't follow procedure. Yes, they can adopt more stringent codes, and then you have to, every time you go into a new jurisdiction, you've got to ask, do you have other locally adopted codes? And if there are, then you have to apprise your subcontractors of what they need to do to satisfy that particular jurisdiction.
I'm not sure how you'd keep up with it all. Ever changing. One other issue that you brought up, and I want to let you know that this is being looked at, was the issue of the sales tax, the withholding for a subcontractor. I'm working currently with someone, I guess a fellow industry, and more the general contractors, but that issue has been brought up. And I want to let you know we're trying to address that with the Department of Revenue.
I failed to tell you, but in reading the law last night, it actually provides that the sales tax department, if they don't get a form from the builder but they know he's out there, can fill out a form and an estimate of what he does and file it under his name and then start charging him penalties and interest, and he's not even aware that the law exists. And I've run into builders that's happened to.
Well, I think there's a great deal of confusion. I'm also the vice chair of the Ways and Means Committee, and there's a great deal of confusion right now as to sales and use tax regarding construction. And we've been working on that behind the scenes, trying to work with Department of Revenue, but that may be all something this committee also wants to speed up the process. So I certainly appreciate that, and I appreciate some of your comments. Are there comments or questions from committee regarding? Mr. King, thank you. I don't know if you've got written notes and some of the issues that you're specifically dealing with. You've enumerated some here, but this committee would definitely like, if you do have some of those specifics, to have a record of those so that we can work behind the scenes. We do have a question. Representative Braddock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have heard from some people in the building industry recently too about the permits that y'all have to get and the things you have to do to maintain a permit and carry insurance, and there's a lot of cost involved. Is that something that is a problem for you, or you don't really see as a problem?
Permitting always gets more difficult. It never gets easier.
I guess your license is what I'm talking about. Sorry.
We are licensed, and licensed builders have to carry certain insurance requirements, which is reasonable.
Okay, so even with it being down, from what I understand, there's a problem though if they let it lapse, while the building's not going on. It's very costly for that to be maintained, and it's hard to get back or something.
If you're going to be in business, for whatever little business you can find, you've got to maintain the insurance requirements. If you want to suspend your business while we're in this lull and try to find something else to do, you can shelf your builder's license, so to speak, and suspend your insurance. They will allow you to do that.
You can, okay.
They do. Okay. That's a great point.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. King, thank you. We appreciate your testimony. Next, John White.
I promise I'll be quick. My wife gives me all the time. And I told her I was 6'2". That's above average. Did that turn out? Okay, that's as good as I can do. Chairman, thanks for having us.
You could present. I mean, if you want to, you could present from that pulpit.
Oh, that would be great. Thank you.
Yeah, if you.
I may need a little more IT help. I know IT has been the general thing.
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to go to the show. Oh, okay.
So it's not sure.
I'm used to Apple stuff. It's just say slideshow. It starts showing the slide.
Oh. Okay.
I think we go to from beginning right here.
From beginning.
Here we go.
And then you just click it.
All right. Thanks for having us again. Our business, if you can classify it as a startup, we've been at it 2 years now, just with laying out the business models, getting the financing, which is always very difficult, and getting support. It is a very large undertaking. What we're trying to do. It's got a lot of moving parts. And what we have found is that if you can focus on the details, a lot of times everything else takes care of itself. So our business is Odyssey Sports. To give you a little background about myself, I moved here from North Carolina about 4.5 years ago. My daughter, who is now 10, was identified as a tennis prodigy. And so the USTA helped move us here for her to train out of one of the regional facilities here in Atlanta. Those of you that follow tennis know that the southern section is probably one of the most talent-rich sections, and she didn't like Florida because it had too many mosquitoes and gnats. So so we ended up here, and so a lot of the premises and things that we came behind our strategies came about through a visit that we had at an academy in Florida called IMG, formerly Nick Bollettieri Tennis. And what Nick Bollettieri has done is he has sold his business to a large sports agency firm called IMG, and he's increased his economy of scale. So essentially now he's not just doing tennis, he's doing a number of sports. So as we began to look at strategies, one of the things that we identified and we were able to find out was two key indicators, which we feel really drive our model. Georgia is second in the nation in childhood obesity cases. And we in metropolitan Atlanta are still one of the fastest growing metropolitan areas, but we're last in job creation. So that being said, there are some grim indicators, but where there are grim indicators, we think there are positive opportunities. And so we created Odyssey Sports essentially for kids. It is designed to help with the fight of childhood obesity. It is a very large economy of scale model. So as I go through the process, just picture a big Walmart fitness facility for kids. So we feel we got a strong team we've been able to assemble. My partners and I have spent a lot of money helping to retain these people. And I'm all about the whole premise of putting every penny you have and throwing it all against the wall to create a true small business. I think that's what's great about this country. You can come here and you can work your butt off and you cannot make excuses and you can win. That's what's so great about America, and so we've embraced that. Our facility, in terms of an overview and in terms of the project, we're looking at about a 400,000 square foot indoor athletic and entertainment venue. We'll have multiple indoor sports from tennis to soccer to lacrosse, cheerleading, gymnastics, swimming. We put in multiple components. The things that we feel gives us a major competitive advantage is our foundation component. I ran a very large athletic foundation in North Carolina, and some of the strategies that we've used to create value stem from that. So every kid from ages 5 to 17 will be able to come to our facility for free. They'll be able to have learn a skill, an athletic skill. We'll have academic subsidies. We'll have the best coaching, and it'll be fully funded by the foundation. And I can go into detail about some of the moves that we've made in the foundation and some of the companies that have embraced us and that have given us commitments. The business model has 44 quantifiable sources of retail income. One of the things that I'm a recent business school graduate. I went to a very difficult program at Emory, and I thought I was going to kill myself many a nights. But the going statement was the new norm, and the new norm was created by this guy Michael Porter, who was a Harvard business professor, and he's probably one of the most well-respected business minds in the world. In fact, Mark Zuckerberg, who just became very wealthy today, was one of his prime students. And a lot of the strategies that they came up surrounding Facebook were around Porter's analysis. So this new norm means that in order for a business of scale, not a 5-10 person business, but the kind of business that can make everybody in this room look pretty good by what it can do economically and through its job creation. The new norm means that you must have multiple sources of revenue to be sustainable. So the Walmart model, the Costco model, models where you can have an even distribution of cash flows distributed out amongst your product base evenly, which takes the weight off just one. If we get up tomorrow and we find out coffee causes cancer, Starbucks' business model is over with. Starbucks is out. You've got one of the top 5 companies in the country that's out of business because it has one main source of cash flow. We've got the foundation and for-profit components allow us to have ways to channel these multiple income streams. And we anticipate during the construction process, we'll create about 1,500 jobs, and we'll create by year 4, 400 sustainable jobs and 200 ancillary jobs. Those numbers may seem big, but the scale of the facility is big. By eliminating the cost variable, what you allow is a demand to be put in place. And demand is what controls everything. You guys have constituencies based on how many people are there. There's a demand model that can be assembled to say, okay, I need X amount of representatives for X amount of people. So all we have done is apply this to business. My background primarily has been in statistics. So what I typically do is I look at a number of variables and indicators, and I identify what we call outliers. And outliers are generally where you make your money. You identify those outliers, and you figure out some way to address the need, and you have cash flow. So we estimate based on the site that we have selected. We found a site in Atlantic Station. We are in negotiations now with the landowner. Our site is has the second highest traffic count of any location on the Eastern Seaboard. So we have roughly 200,000 cars a day, which is basically it's adjacent to our downtown connector, and the downtown connector is formerly it has very dense traffic counts, and that allows you to create a certain level of demand just by its location. We anticipate just as a base, 500,000 people a year will come in and out of the facility just because of its location. The site is the Pinnacle site at Atlantic Station. There are 3 primary parcels. They're about 2.9 acres. Our preliminary designs, and we're about 60% done with the building design. The building will be roughly 5 stories, but it'll appear to be 15 because with the indoor components, and we feel that that's a real advantage for us because, Georgia, it's great weather. I love it here. It's better than North Carolina, but it gets very hot. We have poor air quality. We have high pollen counts. I had allergy conditions that I didn't even know I had until I moved here. And so by creating an indoor component for kids, we allow them to train and have fun year-round. We feel that we have a solid team. We've got with the proven ability to execute. The people we've been able to get on the team, we've been very fortunate. They've all got a whole lot of little letters behind their names that say they're smart. We have identified our potential equity partners. We have a preliminary financing agreement in place with a private equity lender. We've been able to get some good support from the city. We've been in talks with Real Madrid. Real Madrid is if you guys follow soccer, one of the top soccer franchises in the world. They're 20 times wealthier than the Yankees, which is pretty good. They're looking to create an incubation system to identify talent in our hemisphere and in the Caribbean. They like our program because we're 15 minutes away from the world's busiest airport. They can get athletes in and out, and they can run their programs. So we feel that we can create a tremendous amount of value for the city of Atlanta and for the state of Georgia as a whole. We can make a difference. This will be a nationwide draw for children's athletics, vocational, and educational development. We have a 3-tier strategy that we feel will drive traffic count, and that is by focusing on the things that are already existent. In metropolitan Atlanta and in this region, we have a significant amount of leagues. We have the world's largest tennis league in America, right here in Atlanta. We have the 2nd largest private swim club in Atlanta. We also want to do multiple events. By having a controlled environment, we can manage events for children, for geriatrics, for people that are quadriplegics, and allow everyone to have a good centralized venue in a controlled environment to operate and pursue their interests. We think it's great visual branding for Atlanta. The building, the preliminary designs are magnificent. It looks in my mind like a big piece of chrome, just glimmering in the sunlight. I don't know how expensive it's going to be, but architects tend to not think about what things are going to cost, but at least on paper it looks good. We've been able to get great political support. Fulton County has offered us some incentives because of the creation that we're going to have in terms of value. That's a example of the exterior. That's the side of the building that you would see from the connector. We have been in negotiations from the foundation standpoint with a number of athletic companies. We've had talks with Nike now, and so the interest that Nike has, of course, is the high traffic count and the ability to establish their brand amongst the youth. And so we're going through those initiatives now, as well as completing fundraising and financing. So on the financing end, we have a preliminary letter of credit in place to do the deal. My partners and myself have put up quite a bit of our own money, which we hate to think about, but you have to do what you have to do. And we're at a place now where we have one stipulation left in order to get financing, and the lender is looking for us to put a portion in a secure account, unencumbered, about $10 million, and we're in the process of raising that. And anything you guys can do to help us push this forward, we would love to have it. You know, we're regular guys. We want to create opportunities here in Atlanta and in the country, and we want to help kids. We want to create jobs. I lost my dad in June, and it's been the most difficult thing I've ever had to go through. I'm typically not an emotional person, and he would hate for me to say I was emotional. He was big on not showing emotion. But one of the things that really bothered me about my dad is my dad had done well financially. He had had a number of good paying positions, but he was 62 years old, and he had got laid off from Home Depot about 8 years ago. And at his age, he could never recover. He could never really find solid employment. And I think about him, someone, you know, he had an MBA from Duke, unfortunately. I think that might have been part of his problem. But he couldn't find a job. So to me, think about the people out here who, I mean, everybody in this room has an opportunity. They have opportunities. You guys have connections. You can find somewhere and find a way to survive. But just 20 feet out there are people that came into the world just like we did, in hospitals just like us, kids with nowhere to stay. Our jobs that we're going to create are low to mid-level jobs. They're hourly jobs. They're the people that really need it. And we just want to have an opportunity to do that. We still believe in this country that you can have a vision no matter how big it is and make it happen. One of the things that we come across all the time is, you know, and of course in this you're going to get skepticism. And one guy tells me, well, you know, John, you're being unrealistic, and this thing has a lot of moving parts. Well, so does a 747. We get on a 747, we'll fly it all the way to France, and we're not thinking 1 minute about how many moving parts that it takes to pull billions of pounds off of the ground and keep it in the air. And so I think that if we can embrace really what America has stood for, not just with our project, everybody that came today has a vision. They want to add value. They're not begging. I think if we can embrace that and we can think about the resources that we have access to, if we can be creative and open-minded, if we can be positive instead of skeptical, then I think we can make a difference. Whether our project happens or not, we've got it's probably going to happen. We've got a great shot at it happening. We are fortunate to have been put in a number of positions. Andrew Young is one of our business partners. He bought in 10% equity in the deal, and a lot of things happened when he got involved. But the fact of the matter is we still need help, and we hope that you guys can find it in your hearts to think of any way to add resources, to add value, to identify potential investors. Anything you can do, we greatly appreciate it.
We appreciate your presentation.
Thanks.
Certainly, as we're in this crisis that we're in, we're looking for entrepreneurs, and we're looking for folks to do exactly what you've done, go out and put everything on risk it, put everything out there, and hopefully come up with a successful venture where everybody wins. So with that note, and we appreciate the presentation, are there any things from a regulatory point of view that you guys have run across that would that you know, as a business trying to get started up, that this committee would be interested in trying to look at?
I can tell you this. I mean, if you guys were looking to be creative, one of the things that we've been able to do is create a scenario for potential investors to not be in any risk. That's the one thing that people aren't willing to do now. There's just so much volatility in the market, so much gray area that people with money don't want to move. And what we try to do is create a scenario which, you know, has worked so far. We're raising money now. We have people that are engaging. But if there was some incentive on the state side that rewarded them for putting their private dollars in legitimate business. I mean, our business, it's not a small business. This is a business of scale. This is going to generate $60 million. Okay, this is, you know, it's a real business. Not that the rest aren't, but this type of business, through its scale, affects people. This is what gets noted. This is what gets counted on paper. But to know that, okay, $10 million can go in an escrow account, unencumbered and at risk, and it's just got to stay there for 12 months, and you can finance an $80 million deal because we paid for everything else, and we've gone through all the different stipulations and quantifiable. They've checked out backgrounds, our criminal checks, they've checked our kids out, they've done everything. It's a lot of money. But if you can find some way to reward the people that can see the vision and that want to give money, and give them some sort of incentive or tax break to give money to businesses that can really do something, it would be wonderful. You know, if I had $5 million and it's just sitting in an account, and I can go to somebody and say, okay, you can put your money in our account. It'll be unencumbered. We're going to pay you 7 points over it. Oh, and by the way, the state has some incentives in place for you to get rewarded for helping revitalize the economy. I think that the good people of Georgia have a tremendous amount of insight. There's a tremendous amount of resources here, but people have to be given opportunities. Everyone now is at a stage now where they need some little push just to kind of get through the finish line. And I think if you can create a scenario like that, it would really add a lot of value to what people are trying to do.
Well, we appreciate your testimony, and we appreciate your presentation on this project.
Thank you, Representative Bruce. I appreciate it. Thanks for letting us come out and speak to you today.
All right. Any questions? Thanks. All right. Well, I think that is it today, unless there's somebody else that we have missed out in the audience who came to testify. I want to say thank you to the committee. This has been a long meeting, but we've heard from across the board, from pharmacists to contractors to IT folks to other small businesses. So there are a lot of interesting things and I think topics that have shown themselves through this discussion. We're going to look forward to continuing this. We've got a lot more folks who are signed up who want to come in and testify. Our next meeting is going to be Wednesday, February the 8th. Again, next Wednesday, February the 8th, 2 o'clock, this room, 406 LOB. I really appreciate the attention. I know it's been a long meeting, but I know the people who've traveled far have to come tell us their story. Really appreciate that, and I do too. So with that, we are adjourned, and we look forward to next Wednesday's meeting.